You need to move. The voice was sharp, not loud, but cold enough to make the cabin go quiet. Elodie Moreau blinked. She was still buckled in her seat. 1A, first class. The air smelled of citrus wipes and designer perfume. She was wearing noise-canceling earbuds. But the words pierced through anyway. "I have a ticket," she said softly. The flight attendant, a tall woman with lacquered hair and a badge that read Margot, gave her a slow, flat look. "You're 14, alone. You don't belong in this cabin." People turned. A man in 1C paused his typing. The woman in 2A clutched her glass of champagne tighter. Elodie reached into the seat pocket and handed over her boarding pass. Seat 1A, first class, paid in full. Margot glanced at it, then let out a small scoff. "Well, someone clearly made a mistake." She leaned in. "You need to head back to coach, now." Elodie didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just stood, quietly, slid her backpack onto one shoulder, and walked down the aisle, all 28 rows, toward the back of the plane. She never said another word, but 9 minutes later, $1.1 billion in airline funding vanished, and 19 international airports suspended Northwing's flight clearance. Tell us where you're watching from, because this isn't just about a seat. This is about who the world thinks deserves dignity. Earlier that afternoon, Elodie Moreau stood alone at JFK's Gate B37, her shoulders squared beneath a slim hoodie, fingers resting calmly on the boarding pass tucked into her passport. There was no one with her, but she was far from unprotected. Her guardian, Catherine Ames, attorney of the late Dr. Helena Moreau, had already checked her through TSA and filed all unaccompanied minor protocols. She didn't need anyone to hold her hand, because today, Elodie wasn't just traveling. She was continuing a legacy. The boarding call came. "Now welcoming first-class passengers." She stepped forward and scanned her pass. The gate agent barely glanced at her. "Down that way, kid." Inside the cabin, Elodie found her seat, 1A, and slid in, quietly. The leather still smelled new. There was sparkling water already waiting in the holder. She placed her backpack gently beneath the seat, pulled out a hardbound book, and rested it on her lap. Ethics and Systems, A Global Overview, by Dr. Helena Moreau. Her mother. It had been 10 months since the accident. 10 months since the headline read, "Ethics expert dies in mid-air turbulence." Was she targeted? Her mother hadn't just written books. She built systems. Helena Moreau had created the Skyscan Index, a live ethics compliance network that scored airlines, airports, and staff in real time. It was used by 42 international airports, 6 ESG-aligned investment funds, and even the FAA's Internal Integrity Division. And now, her daughter, a 14-year-old with temporary biometric access, sat quietly with a green-lit bracelet around her wrist. Then came Margot. The confrontation didn't last long. No one raised their voice. That was what made it worse. It was quiet, sharp, calculated, and no one stood up for her. So she walked to the back of the plane, row 31B, between a man with onion chips and a fussy baby. Her knees hit the seat in front of her. Her bag barely fit. Her book wouldn't open all the way. She closed her eyes and tapped twice on the bracelet. Temporary Override Code. Elodie, 7. Authentication verified Skyscan access granted. She opened the Skyscan app. Passenger status, verified minor. Seat 1A, reassigned without cause. Violation, discrimination. Age-based, premium tier. Crew ID, Margot Dennison. Severity index, pending. She tapped, submit. The screen blinked once, then went still. 9 minutes later, at the North Wing Air Compliance Desk, a red level alert blared. One of their own flights had been flagged by a legacy-verified Skyscan delegate. a classification reserved for less than 50 people on the planet. The system triple verified. Elodie Moreau, daughter of Skyscan creator guardian, Catherine Ames, temporary ethics override active. The Skyscan Index executed Protocol 917, Freeze Tier Alpha. ESG funds tied to ethics compliance, $1.1 billion. Withdrawn 19 airports. Flagged the airline as non-compliant auto restrictions triggered on landing slot renewals, security clearance prioritization, and ethics scoreboards. Back on the plane, no one knew. Not yet. Margot passed by with a plastic smile. "Want juice, sweetheart?" Elodie didn't respond. She wasn't angry. She wasn't sad. She was steady. She slipped in her earbuds and hit play on an old recording from her mother's Geneva lecture. When systems fail, they don't scream. They whisper through every protocol denied, every seat reassigned, every dignity ignored. Elodie leaned her head against the scratched window. Outside, the clouds kept moving. Inside, the world was about to shift. Because when your mother built the system, you don't need revenge. You only need one tap. The first person to panic wasn't a flight attendant. It wasn't even someone on the plane. It was Benjamin Kravitz, Director of Investor Compliance at Skylure Capital. His phone buzzed with a Skyscan alert as he was sipping black coffee in his 41st floor office in Lower Manhattan. He glanced at the screen, expecting the usual. A minor alert. A delayed ethics sync. Maybe a late update from Frankfurt. Instead, he saw this. Alert. Tier a violation. North Wing Air Flight 382, JFK to GVA, triggered by Skyscan Legacy Delegate E. Moreau. Action. Protocol 917. Silent freeze engaged. Kravitz choked. He dropped the mug. Porcelain shattered on the floor. "Who the hell is E. Moreau?" he muttered. And then it hit him. His mind raced to the headlines from 10 months earlier. The crash, the name, Helena Moreau. And now her daughter just issued a Tier A protocol? He didn't need to check the Skyscan dashboard again. He already knew what it meant. $1.1 billion in ethics-bound investment across 6 funds. Frozen. Immediate suspension of auto clearance contracts. 19 partner airports would receive an automatic desync notification. And once those flags were set, every single ESG fund tracking algorithm in Europe would blacklist the airline within 48 hours. Back on the plane, Margot was still smiling. She had no idea anything had happened. First class was halfway through drink service. She made small talk with the couple in 2C, then rolled her cart past row 15. In the back, Elodie sat quietly in 31B. She'd pulled her hoodie back on. Her earbuds were still in, and her phone now displayed a simple blinking green checkmark. Skyscan action completed. To anyone else, she looked like a silent teen with a book in her lap, but the world around her had already started to react. Skyscan HQ, Geneva, Switzerland. A direct line alert popped on the personal terminal of Mathieu Amsler, interim director of Skyscan operations. His jaw tightened when he saw the name. Elodie Moreau. Temporary delegate access, used flagged flight, NWA 382 crew violation. Cabin tier discrimination, verified authority level 9, legacy override. He stood up and waved his team in. "We've got a live legacy tier intervention," he said, voice flat. "Get Zurich, Heathrow, and Charles de Gaulle on the line." Someone asked, "Do we pause the freeze?" Amsler stared at the screen. "No, we let it ride." Then he added, "Also, prep the founder's room." That turned heads. No one had opened the founder's room since Helena Moreau died. Within 18 minutes of the TAP Frankfurt, Zurich, and Doha airports suspended premium scheduling privileges for North Wing Air, the airline's carbon credits affiliate was locked out of the EU registry system Compliance Sync, the ESG-backed algorithm used by 4 investment firms, automatically flagged North Wing as non-aligned. And then the news started to leak. Not to the public yet, but in the right circles. The expensive ones. New York. Skylure Capital. 22nd floor, war room. "Who is this girl?" one analyst barked. 14, another replied. French-American, lives with Guardian, but more importantly, she's Helena Moreau's heir, and her access key just validated. A stunned silence. Then someone whispered, "She just pulled 1.1B with a single tap." The room went still. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the signal. A teenager had just used the world's most sophisticated ethics monitoring platform, not to break something, but to prove something, that the system worked and that she knew how to use it. Back in row 31B. The baby next to her was asleep now. The man had finished his jerky. Elodie stared at the seatback screen in front of her. It blinked with a cheerful, "Flight time remaining, 6H42 men." She wasn't smiling. She wasn't even thinking about what had just happened. Instead, she was replaying a memory from 3 years ago, her mother's voice, echoing across the hallway of their old apartment in Lyon. "There will come a day, chérie, when someone tries to take something from you. Not because you did something wrong, but because they think you don't belong. When that day comes, don't scream, don't fight, just press the system." Elodie had asked then, "What system?" Her mother had smiled. "The one that listens when the world won't. The first call to the plane." At 42 minutes into the flight, the cockpit received an encrypted message. "Captain only. Skyscan alert. Flight under protocol review. Do not alter seating without documented justification. Cabin crew behavior under live ethics audit." Captain Ruiz blinked. He had never seen anything like it. He picked up the phone and called the lead flight attendant. "Margot," he said quietly, "did something happen in first class?" Margot scoffed. "What didn't happen? Some kid snuck in there claiming she had a seat. I moved her to economy." "You moved her?" Ruiz asked. "Did she resist?" "No, she was weirdly calm. Why?" Ruiz took a long breath. "Because that weird kid just triggered a Skyscan Tier A audit. And now we're under federal review. Mid-air." Margot's face went pale. Global Aviation Group Chat. Encrypted. Paris Air Ops. North Wing just got flagged by Skyscan. First class violation. Heathrow funding BR. ESG pulled 1.1B in 1 hour. That's nuts. Zurich Infra Chief. Who triggered it? Skyscan Geneva Admin. Delegate ID. E. Moreau, Singapore Aviation Ethics. As in, Helena's daughter? Doha, Risk Team. Someone's about to get buried. FAA Washington. Standing by for report. We'll brief the Senate next week. Sky Ethics, media hold. Story embargoed. For now. Back in the cabin. No one had said anything to Elodie, but the atmosphere had shifted. Flight attendants whispered at the galley. The pilot stayed locked in the cockpit. And Margot? She had stopped walking past row 31 entirely. Elodie sipped her ginger ale and reopened her book. Ethics and Systems, page 43. It is not the system that has failed. It is the assumption that no one is watching. When Flight 382 touched down in Geneva, the sky outside was gray and still, cold in that quiet European way, where everything felt polished but distant. Elodie Moreau stepped off the plane among the crowd of Group 5 passengers, clutching her small backpack, eyes scanning nothing in particular. No announcement was made. No one pointed at her. No one whispered. No one had a clue that this girl, the one bumped from first class by a dismissive flight attendant, had just quietly triggered one of the most significant financial and ethical interventions in airline history. Back in New York, Benjamin Kravitz, Director of Investor Compliance at Skylure Capital, was still reeling from the earlier Skyscan alert. Now he was watching the ripple effects unfold like a multi-billion-dollar landslide, and there wasn't a thing he could do to stop it. 3 more funds had just pulled provisional ESG alignment with North Wing Air. The automated risk score on all flights, routed through Skygate Index, dropped by 3.4 points. And someone in Zurich had just scheduled an ethics audit across 6 airports without even consulting Northwing's legal team. Meanwhile, Catherine Ames, former UN counsel and now Elodie's legal guardian, waited in Geneva's arrivals hall. Her eyes locked onto the small figure emerging from the crowd. Same oversized hoodie, same calm walk. No makeup, no headphones now. Just Elodie, walking like the world hadn't just shifted around her. Catherine knelt down as Elodie approached. "You okay?" "I followed protocol," Elodie said softly. Catherine didn't ask for more. She didn't need to. Hours later, 12 reporters had already received anonymous tips. By sunset, 3 aviation executives had scheduled emergency meetings. And at Skyscan's Geneva HQ, the founder's room, unused since Helena Moreau's death, lit up for the first time in nearly a year. Inside, ethics board members reviewed the logs. Legacy delegate override. Validated. Flight tagged for Tier A ethics breach. Crew identified. Passenger reseated based on unjustified appearance-based suspicion. No video, no social media post, no public complaint. "She didn't say a word online?" one analyst asked. "Nothing," came the reply. "No post, no leak, no media. She just pressed the system." "Then she just taught the system how to work again," someone murmured. At her hotel that evening, Elodie sat by the window, looking out at the lake. The same hotel her mother used to stay in before hearings in Geneva. The same suite. Same teacups. The world had exploded around her. Investors reacting. Ethics councils convening. Airports suspending cooperation. But Elodie said nothing. Not even to Catherine. She just read page after page from her mother's old book and poured tea the way her mom used to teach her, quietly, with purpose. The next morning, 2 men in suits arrived at their door. They didn't come with threats or pressure, just quiet urgency. "We're from the Skyscan Ethics Assembly. We'd like to speak with Elodie." "She's 14, Catherine said. "We understand, but she holds active delegate credentials. She just activated the highest ethics override in our global platform. We believe her insight could guide future protocol revisions." Catherine was ready to say no, until Elodie stood up, zipped her hoodie, and simply said, "It's okay. I want to go." They brought her to the founder's room. No lights, no recording, no transcript. She sat at the edge of a long table lined with leaders, investors, and compliance veterans. No one introduced her. She introduced herself, softly. "Thank you for allowing me to speak," she said. "Thank you for using the system responsibly," replied Mathieu Amsler, the interim director. "Your mother would have been proud." "You don't owe me anything," Elodie replied. "You built a system for people who can't shout. I just followed instructions." One of the ethics board members asked, "Why didn't you report it to the airline or post about it?" "Most kids your age would have," Elodie interrupted gently. "If I had yelled, they'd say I was disruptive. If I had filmed, they'd say I was attention-seeking. But if I had stayed silent, fully silent, no one would know. I used the tool my mother built, that's all." The room fell into a long silence. Then, without any vote, without any motion, the board agreed. The system had worked, not because of noise, but because of design. Outside the building, word had already gotten out. The press didn't know what she said, but they knew she had been there. Cameras clicked. One reporter shouted, "Are you the girl kicked out of first class?" Another asked if she believed the airline was racist. Elodie didn't stop. She didn't smile or run. She looked forward, climbed into the waiting car, and whispered, "I didn't want anything except the truth to be noticed." That line became the headline within hours. She didn't give interviews, didn't open TikTok, didn't live stream. She went back to the hotel and scribbled 2 sentences in her journal. "If silence is power, I used it, but only because someone once built me a switch." She closed the journal, set it on the nightstand, and went to sleep. That night, social media exploded with hashtags. She belongs. Skyscan girl. Seat 1A. Elodie protocol. But Elodie never posted a single word. She didn't need to, because the system had already spoken. Later that evening, as the world debated, speculated, and scrambled to protect its interests, Elodie sat on a leather armchair in the hotel's library lounge. She had found a quiet corner tucked behind a faded globe and a shelf full of international ethics journals, some authored by her mother. A waitress came by silently and left a cup of peppermint tea. Elodie didn't order it. Catherine must have. She stirred the tea slowly. Her thoughts weren't on the headlines or the corporate fallout. They were on a single moment when the flight attendant narrowed her eyes and said, "Honey, this seat isn't for you." She could still feel the weight of every stare, the judgment that wrapped around her not because of what she did, but who she looked like. She hadn't realized until then how easily people saw too young, too quiet, not enough, as if her skin and voice and age had silently filed her under, undeserving. She didn't cry, not when it happened, not when she was reseated in the back, not even when she flagged the incident. But now, alone in the warm quiet of the Geneva night, a tear slid down her cheek, not out of sadness, but out of clarity. Because deep down, she knew this wasn't just about her. It never had been. This was about what the system did to those who didn't have last names like Moreau, to kids who had no delegates, no journals, no fallback. If she, daughter of Helena Moreau, could be dismissed so effortlessly, what happened to the ones no one ever heard about? That was the thought that stayed with her the longest. In another wing of the hotel, Catherine paced on the balcony of their suite, phone to her ear. "No, absolutely not," she said, her voice low but firm. "She will not be part of any press conference. She will not be a brand. She's a child." A pause. Then, "I don't care how much Sky Nova or Clear Lanes wants to sponsor a diversity campaign. This isn't about image rehab." She hung up. Inside the suite, she walked past Elodie's open journal and paused. 2 lines. Just 2. She didn't read them. She didn't need to. The handwriting, tight even, unshaken, said enough. The next morning, without warning, Geneva's Municipal Council issued a statement recognizing Elodie's act as a model of civic digital responsibility. That same hour, 4 regional airports suspended North Wing's access to the local eco-ethical routing privileges. No press release, just silence, followed by absence. By noon, investors began pulling out of North Wing's pending green bond round. Catherine's inbox was overflowing. So was Skyscan's. And somewhere, far from headlines and press statements, a small ethics committee in Lisbon submitted a draft resolution for what would soon be named the Elodie Protocol. It wasn't showy, it wasn't revolutionary by design, but it demanded one simple thing: that every ethics flag triggered by a minor be automatically reviewed by an independent panel within 12 hours and logged publicly. No exceptions. No delays, no silence. Elodie never asked for it. She never even suggested it. But by doing what no one else had done, acting without anger, flagging without fame, she had made something undeniable. Proof that quiet doesn't mean weak. That power, sometimes, is just the ability to say no more without needing anyone to listen, because the system itself already did. And in that quiet Geneva hotel, as the night turned cold again, and the city lights flickered outside, Elodie slept soundly. Not because the world had changed, but because she knew it had started. By the 3rd day, Geneva felt different. Not just colder or more overcast, though it was both, but quieter in a tense, anticipatory way. Like something big was about to be decided, and no one quite knew how to brace for it. In the international wing of Geneva Airport, a new notice quietly replaced a standard digital signage panel. It read, "Notice, all North Wing air routes suspended pending Sky Ethics Protocol review." There was no press conference, no dramatic announcement, just 4 lines. But for the investors tracking airline ethics compliance in real time, it was louder than any headline. 19 airports, 3 airline groups, $1.1 billion in pending ESG funding, frozen. And all of it started with one override from a quiet 14-year-old girl with a legacy access code. But Elodie wasn't following the news. She was eating a bowl of granola in silence while Catherine read through emails and legal letters that kept piling in. One from Brussels, one from Toronto, one from the Global Aviation Standards Council, requesting a private ethics debrief. "You don't have to go to anything," Catherine reminded her gently. "You're not responsible for the storm." "I know," Elodie said, calm. "But I want to understand why it took a storm to make anyone notice." Catherine set the phone down. "Then I think you're ready for what's next." Later that afternoon, they arrived at a private forum hosted at the Palais des Nations. No journalists, no cameras, just 24 people in a curved room overlooking Lake Geneva. Among them were legal counsels, airport executives, 2 international observers from the UN Ethics Committee, and one man who stood out, Richard Langston, chairman of Horizon Fly Group, Northwing's largest rival. Langston didn't look like a CEO. He wore a cardigan and scuffed shoes and spent most of the session sipping mint tea with his eyes half closed, like he was more interested in the view than the discussion. But when Elodie stepped in, he sat forward. "So," he said, "you're the one who pressed the button." Elodie didn't respond. Catherine did. "She's here voluntarily. This is not a deposition." Langston raised both hands, calm. "Not here to interrogate. I'm here to listen." The moderator began with context. Elodie's action, the override code, the ethical breach report, the cascading market response, the loss of public confidence. When it came time for questions, most people kept it clinical, until a young consultant leaned in and asked, "What made you trust the system would respond? A lot of people your age would have just filmed it and gone viral." Elodie paused. "I didn't want attention," she said simply. "I wanted the people who built the system to feel it wake up." Langston chuckled softly. "Well, it woke us all up." Then he leaned in, more serious now. "And what do you want from us now, Elodie? What happens after the wake-up?" She didn't hesitate. "I want the next kid, who doesn't have a mother who built the system, to still be protected." That line changed the tone in the room. Within 72 hours, the Sky Ethics Council announced a vote to ratify a new standard. It would be called the Elodie Protocol, and it would require that every airline operating within EU-aligned jurisdictions adopt a verified ethics response window for all minor flagged overrides, mandatory training on unconscious bias for cabin crews, quarterly reporting of all ethics alerts triggered by passengers. Under 18, refusal to comply would result in automatic suspension from ESG-certified air corridors. Northwing's CEO, who had tried to stay silent through it all, resigned publicly the same evening. The airline's stock tumbled another 11% before stabilizing under the announcement that Langston's Horizon Fly Group would take over 2 of its international routes once deemed untouchable. But in all this chaos, Elodie never gave a single interview. She didn't care for headlines, didn't care who got the routes, didn't even care about the protocol bearing her name. What mattered to her came a few days later, in the form of a letter. It was handwritten, sent from a small town in Morocco. "Hi, I'm not sure if you'll ever see this. My name is Nadia, I'm 12. I saw the story. Something kind of like that happened to me once, but I didn't know what to do. I guess I just wanted to say, thank you. You made me feel like maybe next time I'll speak up." Elodie held the letter in her hand for a long time. Then she folded it, placed it between the pages of her mother's ethics journal, and whispered, "That's enough." That night, Geneva slept like it hadn't in years. But somewhere, across boards, back channels, and briefing rooms, systems began to shift. Not because people feared the next scandal, but because they finally remembered why the system existed in the first place. to protect the ones who no one usually sees, the ones too quiet to shout. And because of Elodie Moreau, they'd never be invisible again. After the vote was cast and the resolution passed, the Palais des Nations emptied slowly. Some delegates shook hands, some left in silence, but a few lingered behind, looking at Elodie as though they weren't quite sure how to say what they wanted to say. One older woman in a dark green blazer approached Catherine first. "Your daughter," she began, then paused. "She reminded me what ethics are supposed to feel like, not just frameworks and reports, but a sense of obligation." Catherine gave a small nod, but her eyes followed Elodie, who had stepped outside to the balcony overlooking the lake. The clouds had broken. A soft, gold-blue haze wrapped around the water like silk. Elodie leaned on the railing and exhaled, not in relief, but in release. For the first time in days, her shoulders didn't feel so heavy. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a voice said beside her. It was Langston again. She didn't flinch, just nodded. "Reminds me of something my grandmother used to say," he continued. "When water is still, it reflects everything around it." Elodie tilted her head. "Are you saying I'm still water?" Langston laughed. "I'm saying, when you stayed calm, the rest of us had to see ourselves clearly. And frankly, a lot of us didn't like what we saw." He waited a beat. "Look, I've been in aviation longer than you've been alive. I've seen all the trends. Token hires, PR-driven pledges, flashy campaigns. But what you did," he shook his head, "you didn't make noise. You made consequence. That's rarer than you think." Elodie looked down at her hands. "I didn't want to punish anyone," she said softly. "I know. That's what makes it powerful." They stood there a while. No more words, just shared quiet and wind. Inside, Catherine was finishing one last conversation when a young ethics coordinator approached her. "Ma'am," he said hesitantly, "we're compiling an internal report for the UN's Aviation Working Group. Would it be possible to speak with Elodie again before you leave?" "She said what she needed to," Catherine replied calmly. "She didn't come here to be a symbol." "I understand," the man said, lowering his voice. "But the way she triggered the override, the system recorded not just compliance, but intentional calibration." Catherine raised an eyebrow. "She didn't just report a violation. She chose a severity level tailored to freeze, but not collapse, the investment ecosystem. That takes more than instinct." Catherine gave a thin smile. "She was watching me work when she was 5. Learned how to hold a room before she could spell jurisdiction. Then she may be the only one who can explain what's next." Catherine didn't reply, but something in her expression softened. That night, back at the hotel, Elodie curled up with a book. Not about politics or ethics or aviation. Just a fantasy novel about a girl who trained birds to carry messages across mountains. And when Catherine walked by her room to check on her, she didn't say anything. Just watched from the doorway for a moment, grateful. Not just because her daughter was safe, not just because justice had moved forward, but because, for the first time, Elodie had stepped into something entirely her own. Not her mother's shadow, not her family's legacy, just herself. Elodie had barely finished her breakfast when the first knock came at the door. Catherine answered. A young hotel staff member stood in the hallway, clutching a small stack of envelopes and a digital tablet. "These just arrived," he said. "And, well, there are reporters downstairs." "How many?" Catherine asked flatly. "More than we've seen since the climate accords in 2022. Catherine sighed, thanked him, and shut the door. Elodie was still in her oversized sweater, hair in a loose braid, spoon halfway to her mouth. "Reporters? You're trending in 17 countries." She blinked. "Why?" "Because a 14-year-old just rewrote aviation ethics without saying a single word to the media. That kind of mystery makes headlines." Elodie lowered her spoon. "What's the headline?" Catherine scanned the tablet. "The Silent Storm. How Elodie Moreau quietly grounded $1 billion." She rolled her eyes. Of course they made it poetic, and that was just the beginning. By noon, their inboxes were flooded. Requests for interviews from The Guardian, New York Times, Le Monde, Al Jazeera, Time, a documentary pitch from Netflix, a film option offer from a US studio. Think The Social Network meets Hidden Figures, but with ethics and a plane. There were also stranger things. A brand wanting Elodie to model noise-canceling headphones. An airline offering a lifetime elite pass in exchange for an exclusive ethics campaign. Catherine barely managed to stop that one before Elodie even saw it. And through it all, Elodie said nothing. Not out of shyness, not out of fear, but because none of it felt real. None of it felt hers. "I didn't do it to be seen," she said quietly that night. "And now that everyone's looking, I feel like I can't move without them turning it into something." Catherine understood. She'd been there. Years ago, when Helena had first built the Skyscan Index, and regulators had tried to spin it as a threat instead of a tool. "The press loves heroes," she said, "but they don't always love the truth behind them." Elodie nodded. "Then I won't give them the soundbite." But silence, as it turns out, can be even more powerful than speech. On day 3, headlines shifted. Why won't Elodie speak? The girl behind the billion-dollar override breaks silence. Except she doesn't. Elodie Moreau and the ethics of not playing along. Social media divided. Some praised her poise. Others accused her of being a plant, a PR stunt, a carefully managed face for global tech regulation. And then came the viral videos. Clips from Geneva, old footage of Helena Moreau, speculative pieces about the override code, even deepfakes of Elodie giving fake speeches. That was the final straw. The next morning, Catherine woke up to find Elodie on the balcony with a mug of tea and her laptop. She was writing something. Not a press release, not a social post. A letter. To everyone watching. I know there are questions. I know there's noise. I'm not here to be a symbol, a brand, or a cautionary tale. I'm just a girl who saw something wrong and had the means, thanks to the work of others before me, to do something about it. That's all. Not everything needs a camera to count. Not every voice needs a microphone to be real. If you're looking for something louder, you won't find it here. But if you're looking for proof that quiet things can matter, then maybe this is it. Elodie. She posted it without comment. No hashtags, no tags, just words. Within 2 hours, the post hit 1.4 million shares. Within a day, world leaders were quoting it. Within a week, the International Ethics Alliance announced a new education initiative called Quiet Power, aimed at training youth in ethics, rights, and silent systems-based intervention. And Elodie? She shut her laptop and went back to her book. But even books couldn't shield her forever. One night, a quiet knock came at their suite. This time, it wasn't hotel staff. It was Richard Langston. He held 2 small boxes and an envelope. "No press," he said. "No PR." Catherine let him in. He handed Elodie the first box. Inside was a smooth black pin shaped like a feather. "This was awarded only twice in our company's history," he said. "Once to an engineer who saved an entire transatlantic fleet from grounding. The other to a whistleblower who stopped a toxic labor practice in '09. Elodie stared. "I didn't work for your company." "No," he said. "But the system you protected protects all of us." She nodded slowly. The second box was smaller. Inside, a lapel tag with the initials EMP. Elodie looked confused. Langston smiled. "It stands for Ethics Monitoring Partner. Not public-facing, not ceremonial, but real. Every month, a rotating panel of 5 advisors reviews flagged incidents across the sector. The 5th seat going forward is yours." Elodie blinked. "I'm 14. "Yes," Langston said. "And some of us needed 14 years to remember what real clarity looks like." He placed the envelope on the table. "When you're ready, no deadline, no obligation." Then he left. Catherine stared after him for a long time. And for the first time in days, Elodie looked up with a spark in her eyes. "Maybe I can help fix it," she said quietly. "Not all of it, but some of it." Catherine smiled. "Start wherever you want. Just don't lose the silence that gave you this voice." A month later, Elodie returned to school. No press followed her through the gates. The attention had cooled. The next global event had come along. But on her desk, folded carefully beneath her books, was a note from her ethics teacher. "This year's ethics curriculum will include a case study on a student who changed an industry without ever raising her voice. I hope you'll help us write it." Elodie smiled and picked up her pen. The letter Elodie posted had ripples far beyond what she could have imagined. In a classroom in Nairobi, a teacher printed it out and taped it beside the school's code of honor. In Seoul, a group of university students used it to open their ethics symposium. In Sao Paulo, a 12-year-old girl stood up in front of her class and read it out loud, her voice trembling with something she didn't yet have a word for: recognition. Meanwhile, in Geneva, a senior advisor at the United Nations forwarded the post to 42 delegates with a single-line message: "This is what we've forgotten." And while the world reshuffled itself around her quiet defiance, Elodie stayed still, observing, reflecting, letting the storm pass over her like rain on a window. One night after dinner, Catherine walked into the living room to find Elodie surrounded by notepads. "What are you doing?" she asked gently. "Tracking the algorithmic patterns behind Sky Nova's internal ethics flagging system," Elodie replied without looking up. "It's more flawed than I thought." Catherine blinked. "Most kids unwind with video games." Elodie smirked. "This is my version of gaming." She turned one of the pages toward her mom. "See this? This gap in the system. They only review flagged incidents from users over 16. Anything younger is dumped into an unverified bin unless escalated manually." Catherine felt her stomach tighten. "So, if you had been less precise, they could have ignored me. Or worse, dismissed the override as a malfunction." Catherine sat down slowly. "And how many like you don't know how to navigate that precision?" Elodie tapped the page. "Exactly. I want to fix that." 2 weeks later, she submitted a technical memo, anonymously, to the Civil Aviation Ethics Board. It outlined a youth-friendly ethics override interface with simplified options, clear severity indexing, and a built-in AI tutor to guide first-time users under the age of 18. She didn't expect much. But within days, the board announced that the proposal would be piloted across 7 countries. No credit was given. Elodie was glad, because she didn't need applause. She needed systems that worked without needing her at all. That night, Catherine handed her a sealed envelope. "Something came for you." Inside was a handwritten note from the former CTO of Clearport Alliance. It was only one line. "The system was never designed to hear girls like you. Thank you for changing the frequency." Elodie sat with that line for a long time. She thought about the plane, the tray table, the whisper of judgment in that flight attendant's voice, and how 9 minutes later, everything had started to shift. Not because she yelled, not because she fought, but because she believed the system should listen and made sure it did. She folded the note carefully, placed it in the back of her journal, and wrote a single sentence underneath. "If a system can be taught to hear us, it can also be taught to protect us." Then she closed the journal and went to sleep knowing the world was, quietly, listening. 3 months later, Elodie sat alone in a soundproof conference room. A badge clipped to her collar. Ethics Monitoring Partner, Temporary Advisor. This wasn't a title she asked for. She hadn't even responded to the original invitation until Langston followed up with a handwritten note. "Your silence moved the world. But in this room, we need your voice." So here she was, 14 years old, hair in a neat ponytail, blazer 2 sizes too big, hands folded neatly in her lap. Surrounding her were 4 adults, each decades older, with resumes longer than novels. One of them, A stern woman from the Canadian Aviation Council leaned forward. "Elodie, given your familiarity with override protocols, what's your view on the ethics feedback loop in regional hubs?" Elodie didn't blink. "You're asking the wrong question," she replied. "It's not about feedback loops. It's about delay thresholds. By the time most regional hubs receive verified input, the ethics score has already tanked. It's reactive, not preventative." A pause. Then one of the men scribbled a note. Another cleared his throat. "And what would you recommend?" She reached into her backpack and pulled out a printout. "A two-path escalation system," she said. "One calibrated for airport-level alerts, one routed directly through the Flight Passenger Treatment Index. That way, small violations stop becoming big scandals." Langston, seated quietly in the back, smiled. She was ready. Outside the meeting, things were changing fast. The story of Elodie had faded from headlines, but lingered in policies. Her name didn't appear in memos, but the structures she influenced were being adopted across Europe and parts of Asia. In Dubai, a new airline safety training module was based on her override logic. In Chicago, an aviation ethics charter had just passed, citing anonymous youth-authored protocol contributions. And in Geneva, her school had built an optional ethics and systems course, with an entire semester titled "The Power of Invisible Reform." Elodie didn't take the class. She already lived it. But she wasn't immune to the cost. Some students still whispered when she walked by. Some teachers, well-meaning, mostly, called her our quiet hero, or the override girl, as if her life could be compressed into a single switch. One day, she came home to find Catherine scrolling through dozens of messages on a parent forum. "She's being invited to speak at a gala in Paris," Catherine said without much enthusiasm. "A panel in Singapore, a youth conference in DC. Elodie sank onto the couch. "Do any of them want to hear about how long it took me to sleep again after that flight?" Catherine looked at her. "No," she admitted. "They want the story, not the truth." "Then maybe," Elodie said. "We need to stop feeding them one without the other." So she did something bold. She agreed to speak at one event. Only one. A closed-session roundtable hosted by the UN's Ethics and Transport Committee. No cameras, no journalists, just 20 people in a circle, invited for their impact on aviation justice. Catherine flew with her. As they walked toward the security checkpoint, Elodie noticed something. One of the attendants checking bags flinched when she saw her name on the boarding pass. "You're the override girl," the woman said. Her tone wasn't mocking, more like haunted. Elodie hesitated. "Yes, my nephew was on one of the grounded flights," the woman whispered. "He's autistic. The crew on his plane was told to contain him when he got upset. But because of the freeze, that crew was off duty. He got a team that treated him like a person." Elodie didn't know what to say, so she just nodded. And the woman pressed her boarding pass into her hand like she was passing on something sacred. The roundtable took place in a small, high-ceilinged room at the Palais Wilson in Geneva. No banners, no flags, just people. Langston was there, of course. So was an indigenous rights activist from Bolivia, a pilot-turned-whistleblower from Germany, and a wheelchair-bound data analyst from Tokyo who once redesigned an entire boarding system just to make it fairer. They each spoke, one by one. Stories of small resistances, tiny changes that grew roots. Then it was Elodie's turn. She stood. No script, no screen, just her voice. "I didn't set out to change anything," she said. "I just wanted to keep one moment from becoming a pattern." She told them about the flight, the tray table, the look on the flight attendant's face. She didn't dramatize it, didn't cry. She spoke like someone who had lived through it and done the math afterward. "And the more I ran the numbers," she said, "the more I realized we don't need louder passengers. We need quieter systems that actually listen." After she sat down, no one spoke for a long time. Then the pilot-turned-whistleblower clapped once, and the room followed. The next day, Elodie and Catherine visited the local cafe they always stopped at after Geneva trips. Same terrace table, Same old waiter who never asked questions. As Elodie stirred her tea, Catherine finally asked what had been on her mind. "Do you regret any of it?" Elodie looked out over the lake, thought for a long time. "I regret that it had to happen to me," she said, "but I don't regret what I did with it." Catherine nodded slowly. "Neither do I." They sat in silence, not the kind that hides things, the kind that holds them. Later that week, Elodie received a notification on her tablet. A small update from the Ethics Oversight Network. Revised passenger equity threshold activated. New protocols for minor-initiated overrides approved. System update named EM14. She stared at the screen, not because she needed recognition, but because sometimes the world gets the message, even when you don't speak it. Elodie hadn't planned to return to the US that spring, but when the FAA requested her presence, technically as a citizen advisor, though the invitation came signed by the deputy secretary, Catherine didn't argue. The meeting would take place in Washington, D.C., at a private ethics retreat organized in partnership with the Department of Transportation. A quiet affair, not a summit, not a press event. Just decision-makers and a few chosen outsiders. "I'm not a politician," Elodie said as their train pulled out of the Geneva station. "You're not," Catherine agreed. "You're worse. You're a mirror." Elodie raised an eyebrow. "People see themselves in you," Catherine said. "That's why it terrifies them." The retreat was held at a historical estate just outside D.C., a place that smelled of pine wood, old carpet, and unresolved legislation. Elodie arrived wearing black slacks, a cream blouse, and the same backpack she'd carried since that first flight. No press, no photographers, just security, hushed voices, and a round table with chairs arranged in a perfect circle. As she entered, she recognized two faces immediately: Langston Graves and Ms. Helen Wu, the lead ethics prosecutor for the Pacific Aviation Consortium. The rest were strangers, powerful and patient, the kind who didn't need to talk fast because they already owned the minutes. One of the moderators stood. "Thank you all for coming. As you know, we're here to finalize provisions of the Passenger Equity Charter and its implementation roadmap." He nodded at Elodie. "Particularly Section 3, minor initiated overrides and youth access protocols." That was her part. Everyone turned. Elodie stood and, without cue cards or projection, began. "I've reviewed the proposed language. I believe the intention is good, but intention isn't protection." She glanced around the room, her voice steady. "For example, requiring biometric verification for passengers under 16 to trigger an override assumes those passengers have parental accounts or devices. But in practice, many travel alone, or in emergencies, or under stress. So, if we design for perfection, we'll punish reality." Someone scribbled a note. Another shifted in their chair. "Instead," Elodie continued, "I'm recommending a temporary override model that uses real-time behavior scanning, not identity input. The system already has that capability. It just isn't prioritized. If a child is in visible distress or forcibly relocated, the system should flag that, even if no override is manually activated." A woman at the end of the table spoke up. "That opens the door for false positives." Elodie didn't flinch. "Yes, but false positives are reversible. Trauma isn't." After the meeting, Langston caught up to her in the hallway. "Where did you learn to argue like that?" "I didn't," she said. "I just remember what it felt like not to be believed." They walked together to the lounge. Langston lowered his voice. "Tomorrow they'll vote on your clause. And I'll be honest, some are hesitant. They say it gives too much power to minors." Elodie gave a thin smile. "That's the point. We've spent decades pretending power only belongs to adults. But we're the ones sitting on planes, being silenced, told to stay in our seats. So maybe it's time the seats started listening back." Langston nodded slowly. "You're not just making rules. You're remaking trust." That night, Elodie couldn't sleep. The estate library was open 24/7, so she wandered in, barefoot in her hoodie. She found a worn leather chair near a fireplace, pulled out her tablet, and reopened the latest draft of the charter. She scrolled past her section, past the technical language, and stopped on a line Langston had once written as a placeholder. Passengers are not problems, they are people. She stared at it, then changed it. Passengers are not threats, they are testimonies. At dawn, she stood by the windows, watching the fog lift off the trees when she heard footsteps behind her. It was Helen Wu. "I used to think silence was compliance," Helen said. "Then I read your report. Now I think silence might be strategy." Elodie turned. "Or survival." Helen sat beside her. "You'll need both." She placed something on the table, a small card with a gold seal embossed in the corner. "What's this?" "A permanent position on the Global Passenger Equity Board. Advisory status only. For now." Elodie blinked. "I'm 14? Helen smiled. "So was Malala, Greta, Claudette Colvin. Sometimes justice doesn't wait for age to catch up." Elodie took the card, said nothing, but her chest felt different. Not pride, not fear. Readiness. The vote passed unanimously. Section 3. Elodie's clause would be implemented globally, binding across 42 countries, with FAA and ICAO enforcement backing. No speeches, no media storm, just policy, the kind that sticks. 2 weeks later, Elodie was back in Geneva. Her school didn't hold an assembly or parade. Her classmates still whispered sometimes, but now they whispered differently, with curiosity, with respect, with questions. "How do you know where to push?" one girl asked her after class. Elodie shrugged. "I don't. I just know where it hurts." That Friday, as Catherine made dinner, Elodie sat in her room, drafting something on her laptop. Not an essay, not a policy, a letter. She titled it, "For the Girls Still Sitting on the Plane." Then she wrote, "I know how it feels, when they look at you like you don't belong in the seat you earned, when they speak over you, move you, reduce you. But I also know what happens when you don't move quietly. When you trust your instincts, you don't need power. You are the power." She closed the laptop, exhaled, then opened a new tab, a website. It had one sentence at the top: "Redesign the system that failed you." She clicked Start. 3 days after the vote, Elodie received an unmarked envelope in the mailbox outside their apartment in Geneva. Inside was a folded letter, typed on plain white paper. "Miss Elodie Marin, I was on flight 142 from Milan to Montreal last spring. My son Matteo is nonverbal and travels with a sensory processing device. On that flight, he was nearly restrained because he screamed when the window shade was shut by another passenger. The crew assumed aggression. But because of your temporary override freeze last year, that crew had been grounded and replaced by one recently briefed on your case." They paused. They asked questions. They listened. Matteo came home with his dignity intact. "Thank you." A mother who never got to say it in person. Elodie stared at the paper, her hand trembling. She didn't realize until now how desperately she needed this. Confirmation not just from laws or charters or government stamps, but from someone real. Someone who had lived a different version of what she had gone through and made it through whole. She tucked the letter inside her ethics binder. It didn't need to be framed. It had already been etched into her. That weekend, Catherine took her to a trail just outside the city, an old forest path covered in moss and dotted with benches, the kind where hikers carved initials and lovers left forgotten scarves. "You've been inside too long," Catherine said. "The world isn't just rooms and policies." Elodie laughed softly. "Feels like I've been living inside a PowerPoint slide." They walked for hours, silent at times. Other moments filled with questions that had nothing to do with systems or charters. Like what Elodie wanted to study in college. Like whether she'd ever learn to drive. Like whether she still dreamed. "I think I do," Elodie said as they paused near a small stream. "But they're different now. Smaller. More precise." "How so?" "I used to dream about changing the world. Now I dream about making sure no one has to feel the way I did that day on the plane. That's enough." Catherine looked at her daughter, truly looked at her. The child was still there, but she was fused now with something older, calmer, sharpened not by cynicism, but clarity. Back in school the following Monday, Ms. Lavoie called Elodie into her office. Not for trouble, for something else. "You've been nominated," the headmistress said, "for the Belvoir Award." Elodie blinked. "What's that?" "It's a recognition for those who've made a measurable ethical contribution to international cooperation, usually given to NGO leaders or retired diplomats. But the committee made an exception." Elodie frowned. "Why me?" Ms. Lavoie smiled. "Because you didn't wait for adulthood to be ethical. The ceremony would be in October." Elodie didn't ask for a dress. She asked for a list of former recipients. She read every name. She underlined the ones who had failed forward, who had made mistakes but kept reforming anyway. Not saints. Just people who refused to forget what being powerless felt like. That's who she wanted to be. Not the hero in the headline, the architect behind the scenes, the quiet power in the seat you never thought would matter. It started with a single ping on Elodie's tablet, then another, then 10 more. A private aviation watchdog group had published a report. 4 airlines were caught manipulating their ethics scoring systems using off-the-books AI to suppress override flags, especially ones triggered by young passengers. And one of those airlines? Sky Nova, the very same company whose flight had marked the beginning of everything for her. Elodie stared at the screen, jaw tight, a mixture of disbelief and quiet fury swirling inside her. They hadn't learned. Or worse, they had, and chose to cover it up. Across the globe, the reactions were immediate. Whistleblower testimonies, passenger videos, screenshots of training modules teaching crew how to de-escalate overrides from minors without formal resolution. The damage was viral. The headlines harsher than she expected. But Elodie didn't cheer. She felt betrayed. Not because the system failed again, but because it failed so publicly, so deliberately, and right after the world had supposedly changed. She forwarded the report to Langston Graves and Helen Wu. Within minutes, both responded. Langston: confirmed. FAA has suspended Sky Nova's override compliance certification effective immediately. Helen: already convening emergency hearing. Want you there. This isn't just a scandal. This is a precedent. Catherine watched her daughter pace across the living room. You okay? No, Elodie replied flatly. They knew. They knew kids wouldn't be taken seriously, so they built the system to bury us again. Catherine didn't interrupt. I gave them a map, Elodie said. They just took another route. The emergency hearing took place at the International Ethics Court in The Hague. For the first time, Elodie entered not as a citizen advisor, but as a formal witness of record. The chamber buzzed with press and observers. Sky Nova's legal team tried to delay her testimony, arguing her age undermined objectivity. The judge, an older South African woman with silver locks, looked over her glasses and said, Miss Marin's age is not the problem. Your company's ethics bypass is. Elodie stepped up to the podium. She wore no makeup, no blazer, just a deep blue dress and a pin of the passenger equity charter on her collar. And she spoke slowly, clearly, with the weight of every ignored passenger sitting in that courtroom with her. When a system is designed to be fair and then rigged to silence the youngest voices inside it, it's not just unethical. It's violent. Violent in the way it rewrites memory, in the way it tells children their trauma was a glitch, not a violation. You built a machine to mute us, but you forgot one thing. We built a louder one. She looked up, dead center at the Sky Nova CEO. And this time, we own the override. The courtroom was dead silent. Then came the ruling. Sky Nova's override AI architecture was to be seized and audited by an independent global body, Their override compliance was revoked in 27 countries pending reforms. 680 ounces in ESG-aligned funding was frozen. All affiliated carriers were placed on a 90-day watch list. But more than that, the judges ordered that the ethics override system must remain accessible to any passenger age 12 and above, with no delay, escalation wall, or biometric tethering. They called it the Marin Clause. Elodie didn't cry. Not in court. Not on the flight home. But when she opened her inbox and saw thousands of young people submitting their own override experiences into a public archive, she broke. Not out of sadness, out of awe. It was working. The silence was cracking. Later that week, Helen Wu called. "You'll be happy to know we've finalized the ethics fail-safe protocol. Every override trigger will now carry a shadow log. It can't be deleted, only reviewed by a neutral party." Elodie nodded. "Good. That's how we make it real." Helen chuckled. "You know, the press keeps calling you the override girl." Elodie rolled her eyes. "Can we not? What should we call you instead?" She thought about it, then said quietly, "A passenger." In the months that followed, school life resumed. Midterms, awkward group projects, cafeteria debates over who would be homecoming president. But Elodie didn't fade into the background. Instead, she began teaching a weekly online workshop called Know Your Systems, guiding young travelers, especially girls, through digital rights, safety protocols, and ethics triggers. She turned her journal entries into open letters, her override logs into teaching tools. She was no longer just using the system, she was reprogramming it, one child at a time. One Sunday morning, she received a message from the same woman who had sent that first thank you letter about her son Mateo. But this time, it was a video. In it, Mateo, now calm and smiling, wore headphones and stood in front of a classroom full of children. A caption read, "Mateo's first presentation on passenger rights." He signed a message, "We matter too." Elodie covered her mouth. Catherine stood behind her, hand on her shoulder. "You did that," she said. "No," Elodie whispered. "We're doing this, together." The conference hall buzzed with quiet anticipation. From diplomats to tech innovators, civil rights activists to airline CEOs, everyone had shown up for one reason, to hear what a 14-year-old girl had to say. Elodie stood behind the curtain, her heart pounding. Not from fear, but from something deeper. Conviction. This wasn't a school presentation. It wasn't a testimony under oath. This was her first international keynote. The event was the Global Passenger Justice Summit, an emergency gathering called in response to the override manipulation scandal. Helen Wu had insisted Elodie close out the conference. "You didn't just expose a system flaw," Helen told her. "You redefined what oversight means." Elodie adjusted the simple earpiece, took a deep breath, and stepped onto the stage. The applause was polite at first. Then it grew. By the time she reached the podium, the room had risen to its feet. She waited for the silence. Then she spoke. "I'm not here today because I want to be," she said. "I'm here because I had to be, because a year ago I was kicked out of a seat I had every right to occupy, and the world called it a misunderstanding." She paused. "But it wasn't. It was a test, not of me, but of you, of whether your systems could hear someone like me, and they didn't." The room was still. No rustling, no phones, just focus. Justice doesn't start in courtrooms. It starts in cabins, at gate counters, in the tiny decisions made by those in charge when they think no one's watching. She tapped her journal, laid flat on the podium. "This is what I used to write in when no one was listening. But now, I want it to become something more." She turned to the screen behind her. A single phrase appeared. "The Passenger Equity Index." The room leaned in. Elodie laid out the concept clearly. A global, youth-inclusive ethics dashboard. Real-time feedback, verified reporting tools, shadow logs immune to deletion, quarterly transparency audits. But the most revolutionary idea? Every traveler, age 12 and up, would receive a passenger equity scorecard, a simple visual tool showing whether their rights had been honored, dismissed, or flagged during air travel. The system wouldn't judge passengers. It would measure airlines, a form of inverse accountability. For once, it wouldn't be about proving you were harmed. It would be about airlines proving they weren't the ones doing it. The first to speak after her presentation wasn't a diplomat or lawyer. It was a young black girl, maybe 11, seated in the youth delegation. She stood up, voice clear. "If we had this 2 years ago, my little brother wouldn't have been called dangerous because he flapped his hands. He's autistic." The room murmured. A man in a gray suit raised his hand. "Isn't this too complex for kids to manage?" Elodie looked directly at him. "You're not asking if we can manage it. You're asking if you are ready to be held accountable by us." Silence. Then Helen Wu clapped. Then everyone else did. That night, Elodie couldn't sleep. Her speech had gone viral. Again. But this time, something felt different. Bigger. This wasn't just about one flight anymore. It was about re-architecting how power worked in everyday travel. She turned to her notebook and started drawing. Feedback loops, rating layers, decision nodes. She wasn't a coder, but she was a builder, a translator between pain and policy. The phone buzzed. It was Langston Graves. "Did you mean for this to trigger a UN emergency vote?" Elodie blinked. "No, but I'm not surprised." Within 48 hours, the UN Civil Air Commission had moved to adopt the Passenger Equity Index for pilot testing in 6 nations. 3 more pledged support by the end of the week. But the real shift came when Air Union, a massive airline alliance across 12 countries, preemptively signed on, stating, "We don't want to wait until we're shamed. We want to earn trust." It sent shockwaves across the industry. The CEO of Sky Nova, publicly humiliated just 2 months earlier, offered a rare interview and said only this: "We're watching a new generation reprogram aviation in real time, and they're not asking for permission." But even as the world embraced the movement, Elodie remained grounded, focused. She insisted her workshops stay free. She declined brand deals. When a major tech company offered to sponsor her index in exchange for naming rights, she replied, "It's not for sale, because the second a child's dignity becomes a marketing tool, we've already lost." Then, one morning, a simple notification appeared in her inbox. "Passenger Equity Index. System now live in 3 regions: Geneva, Toronto, and Tokyo." Elodie clicked the demo. The interface was clean. Simple. A small icon next to your boarding pass. Tap it, and it lit up green, yellow, or red. Below, a note appeared. "If you feel your experience does not match the airline's ethics rating, you may file a micro-report. No legal knowledge required, no adult cosign needed." And at the very bottom, "Powered by the Marin Protocol." Elodie stared, not because her name was there, but because for once, justice wasn't theoretical. It was operational. At school, no one treated her differently, except maybe Liam, the kid who used to tease her about her techie obsession, now asking for help understanding his cousin's override case. "Elodie," he said sheepishly, "can you show me how to log it right?" She grinned. "Sure." And as she walked him through the steps, something clicked. Not just for him, for her. Because maybe this was the point all along, not to be the center of the system, but to make sure no one else ever had to be. 2 weeks after the index launch, Elodie received a package. Inside was a printed boarding pass from a girl in Johannesburg. On the back was a handwritten note. "Green light. First time ever. No stares, no comments, just peace. Thank you." Beneath that was a drawing, a plane with wings shaped like open hands. Elodie placed the card next to the others. She had a shoebox full of them now, filled with thank you notes from strangers. She didn't collect them for pride. She collected them for proof. Proof that invisible things, like dignity, fairness, and feeling safe, could actually leave a mark. One evening, Catherine found her daughter fast asleep at her desk, laptop still open. On screen was a policy memo she was editing for the Pacific Ethics Consortium. Catherine smiled, brushed a strand of hair away from Elodie's face, and whispered, "You did it, baby." But as she turned off the light, she saw the last line Elodie had typed. "The system is working, but we are not done." Across the ocean, ripple effects continued. In South Korea, a group of teens launched a regional override tracker using Elodie's open-source framework. In Brazil, disability rights advocates embedded the index into their existing passenger support hotline. And in Germany, a retired flight attendant publicly apologized in a video for all the time she laughed off young passengers' complaints. "I didn't think it was my job to believe them. Now I know better." Elodie's schedule filled fast. She balanced school, interviews, and weekly digital roundtables with young ethics ambassadors around the world. But she stayed careful. Every platform she built had one rule: no adult interference without consent from the youth delegates. And when a tech exec tried to sneak in back-end access to override reports, she shut it down and made the entire correspondence public. The post went viral. Caption: "We don't need saviors. We need firewalls." Meanwhile, behind closed doors, the aviation industry scrambled. Ethics councils were restructured, training manuals rewritten. Even the International Civil Aviation Organization issued a rare acknowledgement. Young passengers are not just travelers. They are compliance participants. The system must adapt. Then came the moment Elodie didn't see coming. She received an encrypted message from someone at the FAA. "We've reviewed your protocol. We'd like you to co-author the next ethics certification standard for North American Airlines." Elodie sat frozen for several minutes, not because she was unsure, but because this wasn't symbolic. It was systemic. The following week, she flew to Washington, D.C. for the first drafting session. And as she walked into the glass-walled room, filled with aviation lawyers, engineers, and regulators, no one asked her age. No one asked if she was sure she belonged. They just pulled out her chair, passed her a folder, and said, "Let's get to work." That night, in her hotel room, she opened her journal and wrote, "This is what it means to fly, not just in the air, but through the silence, into the room they swore I'd never enter." Then she closed the journal, looked out over the city lights, and whispered, "Let's redesign everything." 3 months after the Passenger Equity Index went live, the first quarterly review arrived on Elodie's tablet with a gentle chime at 6:02 a.m., just as she was waking up to the soft glow of Geneva's dawn. She blinked at the screen. Global Passenger Equity Index, Q1 metrics. 32% reduction in first-class override flags globally. 28% drop in passenger complaints citing discrimination. 12 airlines on board, combined 78% market share. Employee satisfaction in trained routes up 19%. 4 new countries expressing interest in pilot programs. Elodie sat up. She'd seen draft numbers, but this was real. A report stamped with logos from the FAA, ICAO, and the European Aviation Ethics Council. It had her name in the footer. Lead advisor, E. Moreau. Catherine peeked in. "Already up?" Elodie nodded, bleary-eyed but smiling. They actually did it. They poured coffee at the tiny kitchenette. The steam curled in the cool morning air as they read through each figure. "Look at this," Catherine said, pointing at the drop in passenger complaints. More than a quarter fewer people felt sidelined. Elodie tapped the comments section. Passengers from Tokyo to Toronto had posted short notes. "Finally felt seen. They didn't ignore me when I needed special assistance. I clicked green, and someone actually called me afterward. Incredible." Elodie read them aloud, voice catching. They actually called. Her eyes drifted to the window, where the sun was just peeking above the Alps. "It's working," she whispered. People are using it. By mid-morning, Geneva Airport's manager called a brief meeting. He'd seen the index scorecards for flights into and out of Geneva, a steady green line. Geneva had one of the highest early compliance rates, thanks to proactive retraining and partnership with Elodie's workshop. Your protocol saved our reputation, he told her, shaking her hand firmly. Customers are noticing the difference. We owe you. Elodie shrugged. I just asked for respect. The manager laughed. That's enough to start a revolution. That afternoon, she joined a video conference with Horizon Fly Group's training division. Richard Langston greeted her with a warm smile. Good morning, lead advisor, he said with a wink. Elodie rolled her eyes affectionately. Morning, Chairman. They reviewed employee feedback for the routes that had adopted her training. A Horizon Fly flight attendant in Atlanta had submitted a note. We used to feel like we were policing passengers. Now we partner with them. It's surprising how much easier that is. Langston said, Your approach is actually making our job more humane and less stressful. Elodie smiled. That was the point. At school that week, Elodie's friends teased her about the Elodie effect. Next time we complain about cafeteria lines, let's override them ourselves, joked Liam. She laughed. It was good to feel like a normal kid again, even if secretly she was anything but. The real test came 2 weeks later, when North Wing Air published its own internal compliance audit, showing a 45% drop in flagged incidents across its revamped routes. The CEO, who had once tried to silence her, released a public statement. We listened, and we learned. Our customers deserve more than seats. They deserve respect. Elodie nearly spit out her tea. Catherine chuckled. See, even they learned something. Elodie nodded. Let's hope they don't unlearn it. That evening, the ethics board invited her to another closed session. This time, they wanted to discuss Phase 2, scaling the index to cover ground transportation and maritime travel. She walked into a high-security conference suite in Brussels. Around the table were train operators, ferry captains, and even a diplomat from the World Port Authority. They'd flown her in because the plan hinged on one key insight: integration across modes. Travelers should have the same rights whether they fly, sail, or ride a train. A representative from Eurorail began, If we can apply your override logic to rail networks, we could dramatically reduce youth vulnerability in remote stations. Elodie nodded. Yes, and the same principles apply: respect, visibility, accountability. They spent hours hashing out data formats, user interfaces, and cross-agency workflows. Elodie spoke in measured, confident tones, translating legal jargon into actionable bullet points. By the end of the day, they had a memorandum of understanding ready for signature in 3 weeks. Back in Switzerland, late one night, Elodie and Catherine stood in the living room, drinking too strong hot chocolate. Do you ever worry we're moving too fast? Catherine asked, voice low and thoughtful. Elodie thought for a moment. I worry about systems outpacing human empathy, but we can't slow down if it means leaving people behind. Catherine nodded. True, just remember to take a break when you need it. Elodie smiled. I will. Next week I'm taking Sunday off. Sunday came, and Elodie spent it painting a miniature model of the Geneva airport she'd built years ago with her mom. She painted tiny override panels at each gate and scribbled her mother's motto along the runway. We build systems to hear the unheard. When Catherine peeked in, she found Elodie asleep, paintbrush in hand, the little model shining under the desk lamp. Catherine covered her with a soft blanket and whispered, You're the change we needed. Don't forget that. Elodie murmured in sleep, Not the change, just the spark. The next morning, the world woke up to another release. Passenger Equity Index now in 16 global regions. It was front-page news in 6 languages. And Elodie? She boarded a regional train to visit her grandparents in Lyon, her heart light. The system she helped reshape was humming gently along, but it didn't need her every moment now. It had its own voice. And, finally, It was speaking up for those who never could. The large conference hall at the Ronald Reagan Building in Washington buzzed with energy an hour before the press conference began. Rows of seats were already filling with journalists clutching notepads and smartphones. Television crews tested camera angles. The scent of fresh coffee and pastries drifted through the air. At the front, under a simple banner reading "Passenger Equity Charter, a new standard for global travel," stood two podiums. On the left was the U.S. Secretary of Transportation, Laurel Martinez, her expression measured, poised to deliver introductory remarks. On the right stood Elodie Moreau, 14 years old, in a navy blazer and white blouse, her dark hair pulled back in a neat braid. Behind them, a video wall displayed the charter's logo, an outline of a plane encircled by diverse silhouettes of passengers. Moments before kickoff, Elodie slipped behind her podium and inhaled slowly. She could feel the eyes on her, the slick-tied lobbyist from a major carrier whispering to her aide, the climate activist whose group had pushed for the charter's youth provisions, even a few school-age kids in the front row holding handwritten signs that read, "We belong here," and "Dignity at every seat." Secretary Martinez took the mic first. She spoke crisply. "Today marks a turning point in how we treat every person who steps onto an aircraft. The Passenger Equity Charter embodies our commitment to respect, transparency, and accountability, principles that must apply to all travelers, especially the youngest among us." Her voice carried authority. Reporters scribbled notes, cameras flashed. Martinez introduced Elodie with genuine warmth. And it was conceived and championed by someone you all already know, Elodie Moreau, whose work has quietly reshaped ethics systems around the globe. Elodie stepped forward. The hall fell silent. "Thank you, Secretary Martinez," she began, her voice calm but clear. "When I first wrote in my journal about the injustice I experienced, I never imagined it would lead to this moment. I never set out to become a symbol. But I realized that symbols can't fix systems. Rules do." She paused to look around the room. "The charter you see behind me is the product of input from travelers, caregivers, engineers, regulators, and even my fellow students. It sets out 4 concrete obligations for every airline operating in participating countries. Immediate override response. Any passenger aged 12 and above who triggers a Flag Level A ethics alert must receive a documented response from a crew member or designated handler within 60 seconds of detection. Transparent reporting. Airlines must publish, quarterly and publicly, anonymized data on override incidents, including the number of triggers, resolution times, and demographic breakdowns. Mandatory youth sensitivity training. All cabin crew and ground staff must complete a certified training module on engaging with young passengers and handling override scenarios. Refreshed annually. Independent audit. A rotating panel of stakeholders, youth representatives, disability advocates, mental health professionals, and ethics experts will audit compliance and have the power to recommend adjustments or sanctions. She pointed to the video wall, which cycled through infographics illustrating each point. This charter isn't about finger-pointing. It's about creating a system that learns from its mistakes, a system where dignity travels alongside every ticket. A smattering of applause rippled through the audience. Secretary Martinez returned to the podium to outline the roadmap. Beginning January 1, 2026, the Charter will be law in all 27 member states of the Aviation Ethics Consortium and voluntary in 15 additional partner countries. Within 1 year, 75% compliance is required, or airlines risk losing their approved carrier status. Q&A began. A reporter from the Wall Street Journal stood. "Miss Moreau, as a teenager, how do you respond to critics who say this charter is unrealistic? An idealistic framework that will increase operational costs and delays?" Elodie didn't hesitate. "I respect that cost and efficiency matter, but I also know what happens when you put profit over people. And asking someone to wait 60 seconds for a respectful response isn't a burden. It's basic decency. Airlines already budget for safety drills, security protocols, and customer service. Youth dignity training and rapid follow-up can fit within those existing frameworks. It's an investment, not an expense. Next, a European broadcast journalist asked, "Beyond the 4 obligations, how will you ensure smaller carriers or budget lines don't get left behind?" Elodie leaned forward. "We've built tiered guidance. Carriers under a certain revenue threshold can access a subsidized training platform, funded by partners who support ethical innovation. We're also developing open-source override tracking code they can implement at minimal cost. The charter isn't about exclusion, it's about empowerment." A mental health advocate from the audience raised her hand. "Elodie, you've never spoken publicly like this before. How have you coped with the sudden global attention?" Her voice shook slightly, an authentic vulnerability. Elodie paused to gather her thoughts. "I'm still learning. I journal every night. I talk with my guardian, Catherine, about boundaries. I remember that this work isn't about me. It's about every child who's ever been silenced. That perspective keeps me grounded." The room exhaled. Cameras stopped flicking. Finally, a skeptical airline executive from a major North American carrier stood. "Miss Moreau, if your charter is so critical, why wasn't it proposed by experts with decades of industry experience? Why by a teenager?" Elodie squared her shoulders. "Because experts build with experience. Children build with fresh eyes. We know what ignorance looks like up close, and sometimes we're the only ones brave enough to say, 'This isn't working.' Combine experience and fresh perspective, and you get a solution that respects both history and possibility." A ripple of applause followed. At the end, Secretary Martinez closed. "Let us remember today that courage comes in many forms. Not only the bravery of those who face danger, but also the courage to speak up when no one expects your voice to matter." Elodie stepped down to a standing ovation. That evening, she and Catherine walked along the Potomac River. The lights of DC shimmered on the water. Elodie carried a small memento from the stage, a paperweight shaped like the charter's logo, gifted by the consortium. "Does it ever feel real?" Catherine asked. Elodie twirled the paperweight in her hand. "Like a dream," she said, "until I remember that dreams are just stories waiting to be built in daylight." Catherine smiled. "We're building quite a story," she said. Elodie nodded. They spent another hour walking in silence, the air between them filled with ripples from the river and distant traffic. By the time they made it back to their hotel, the city lights were starting to fade in the east, heralding a new day. The next morning, Elodie woke to her tablet buzzing again, this time with screenshots of news headlines, social media posts, and comments from travelers around the world. She scanned them quickly. "Just flew with New Pacific Airlines. They actually offered a follow-up call when my 12-year-old niece flagged a discomfort issue. Incredible. Shout out to Passenger Equity Charter for making our family trip stress-free. My flight's ethics rating was green, so I tried it out. When I asked for assistance, a real human came over and listened. First time ever. She belongs." Her chest warmed at the personal stories. These weren't abstract metrics. They were moments of relief, respect, human connection, moments she had dreamed about a year ago, late at night, scribbling thoughts into her journal. Catherine knocked and poked her head in. "Breakfast?" Elodie nodded. As they headed down, the hotel lobby felt less like a grand foyer and more like a crossroads of change. Staff greeted them with polite nods. They had heard of her by now, but with genuine warmth rather than curiosity. Over waffles and fresh fruit, Catherine brought up logistics. "The European rollout begins next week. You'll need to fly to Berlin and Paris for the signings." Elodie stirred her syrup slowly. "Okay. And there's an invitation," Catherine continued, sliding a printed letter across the table. "The Nobel Committee wants to discuss your work at a private luncheon." Elodie's fork paused mid-air. "The Nobel?" she whispered. Catherine smiled. "They said they've never opened a youth liaison position before, but your project fits their new category for social innovation." Elodie exhaled, a mix of excitement and trepidation. She remembered that night by the lakeside when she first wondered if she could handle this. Now she had to decide which parts of this whirlwind to embrace and which to let pass her by. Later that day, she took a cab to the airport for her Berlin flight. Through the window, she watched the Potomac recede, the city bridges sliding behind her like the pages of a closing chapter. She thought of the letter from Johannesburg, of Mateo's smile. She thought of the frontline workers, flight attendants, ground crews, regulators, who had dared to trust her. In Berlin, she was met by a small delegation of civil aviation officials and youth advocates. They escorted her through a series of formal ceremonies, cutting a ribbon at the Brandenburg Gate passenger hub, reviewing demonstration kits for local airlines, and signing the charter into German law. Each moment was filmed, reported, and debated. Yet Elodie found herself tuning out the glare of cameras, focusing instead on the faces of those around her. The young apprentice pilot who beamed when she explained override thresholds. The wheelchair-bound grandmother who shared her own story of boarding struggles. The teenage refugee who said the charter gave her hope to travel safely to see her brother. That night, in her hotel room, Elodie sat on the edge of the bed and flipped through her journal. Every sketch of a policy diagram, every fragment of a speech, every note about a broken system. It was all there. The last page bore a single line in her mother's handwriting. Service is not safe until every passenger matters. Elodie drew a line through the phrase and wrote beneath, and service is not safe until they can call for it, no matter their age. She closed the journal and put it on her nightstand. Tomorrow she flew to Paris for the Nobel luncheon, but tonight she would get some sleep. 2 days later in Paris, the Nobel luncheon was held in a gilded salon near the Seine, every wall lined with portraits of past laureates. Elodie entered quietly in a modest dress, escorted by Catherine and a representative from the Nobel Committee. They took seats at a long table. At the head sat the president of the committee and a handful of scholars. A hush fell as Elodie's name was announced. She stood, placed her hands lightly on the table, and spoke from memory. I don't stand here as someone seeking recognition. I stand for every passenger whose voice was too soft to be heard, and every child whose dignity was too small to be valued. Awards and titles don't change systems. Action does. Let this gathering be a promise that we will use our influence not just to celebrate ideas, but to implement them. She finished to thoughtful silence, then applause that grew into a standing ovation. Reporters later wrote that she stole the room, not with drama, but with unwavering clarity. After the luncheon, the Nobel president approached her. You remind us that moral courage can come in any size. We would be honored to bestow upon you the inaugural Young Innovator Award. Elodie accepted with a small nod, a weight settling comfortably on her shoulders. It was more than a trophy. It was a formal recognition that her influence belonged in the highest circles. Back in Geneva, spring had blossomed. Cherry blossoms lined the streets outside her apartment. Elodie walked to school under petals drifting like confetti. Children still whispered, but now they waved, cheered, even attempted to mimic her calm walk. Inside class, history lessons included a slide on the Passenger Equity Charter. Computer science introduced a module on building ethical algorithms. And in the library, her journal was cataloged, under restricted access, as part of the school's new ethics collection. That afternoon, Catherine found her at their usual balcony seat, sketching policy flowcharts in pastel pink marker. You look peaceful, Catherine said. Elodie paused, marker in hand. I feel listened to. Catherine sat beside her. And now? Elodie drew a final circle around one node. Now, I let it speak itself. A week later, Elodie and a small youth delegation boarded a chartered flight to Tokyo. They were going to launch the index in Asia, working with local advocates. As she buckled into her seat, 13A this time, she didn't think of how far she'd come. She thought of the child in row 31B, the override flag. The silent test. She smiled. There'd be many more rows, many more seats, many more whispers to convert into respect. And as the plane took off, carrying her toward the next horizon, she felt the unmistakable tug of possibility. Because every time she sat down, she reminded the world that sitting didn't mean silencing. It meant being heard. She never imagined she'd be stepping onto a plane again exactly 1 year after that first flight. 1 year since she was shoved out of first class and, with a single tap, set in motion a wave of ethical revolutions across the entire aviation industry. Yet there she was, standing in the jet bridge of Aurora Airlines Flight 109, her boarding pass in one hand, a slender carry-on in the other, gazing at the cabin doors as if they were thresholds into a new world altogether. The flight attendant greeting her at the entrance, young, composed, with a professional but warm smile, paused when she saw Elodie's badge, Youth Ethics Delegate. It was the title Aurora had created to honor the system's original spark, the first and youngest voice in the passenger equity movement. The attendant's name tag read Tiana. She offered Elodie her arm lightly. "Welcome aboard, Miss Moreau. It's an honor to serve you." Elodie returned the smile, a gentle curve of her lips. "Thank you, Tiana." She stepped inside and paused to let the stewardess guide her down the aisle, past seats that now bore small plaques, reserved for youth delegates. No one in those rows believed children had no place in first class anymore. Elodie's seat, 1B, had her name engraved discreetly at the top of the headrest. It felt surreal and right at once. As Tiana led her to the seat, other attendants nodded or offered quiet congratulations. They had completed the mandatory sensitivity training modules codified in the charter. They knew her story, but more than that, they knew the systems she'd helped rebuild. They were proud too, because they had been part of the transformation. Elodie settled in, noticing that even the cabin lighting had been revised to include a gentle green wash whenever an ethics override was successfully followed. She tapped a small green indicator on the console. A soft chime confirmed her override privileges were still active, though now used largely for calibration, not crisis. The cabin fell into a hush as the other passengers recognized her and gave respectful smiles. She felt their gratitude but didn't let it wash over her. She was here to travel, not to be celebrated. She opened her ethics journal, now tattered at the spine, and sketched a quick diagram of the cabin's new override map. Sensors embedded in overhead panels, discrete buttons at every seat, a direct line to a live ethics liaison. She noted how far the system had evolved in 12 short months. Then Tiana returned with a carafe of water and handed Elodie a glass. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "I was in economy when the charter was announced. My sister, she's 10, was terrified of flying. Now, I get to tell her I helped make airlines safer for you. Thank you for giving me that story to share." Elodie's pen hovered mid-page. "Thank you for doing the work," she said softly. "It's the reason I created the protocols in the first place." Tiana nodded and moved on. The engines began to spool, the captain's announcement following. "Good afternoon. Welcome aboard Aurora Flight 109 to San Francisco. We're honored to have Miss Elodie Moreau, Youth Ethics Delegate, among us today." As the plane lifted from the runway, Elodie watched the cityscape shrink beneath her feet. She leaned back, hands clasped, recalling the first time she'd sat in a cramped middle seat, bumped from first class, humiliated, invisible. Back then, the cabin had been cold and indifferent. Now, every light, every gesture, every piece of policy she had a hand in writing glowed with purpose. The seatbelt sign blinked off. Around her, flight attendants approached with trays of refreshments. Tiana paused at Elodie's side again. "Would you like your special meal, Miss Moreau?" she asked, her tone keenly professional. Elodie smiled. "Yes, please. Whatever you recommend." Tiana winked. "The citrus-glazed salmon. It comes with a note explaining how citrus was chosen after a youth poll on clear air flavor preferences." Elodie laughed. "It's funny how even small choices matter." "It's everything," Tiana said, then slid away down the aisle, attending to the next passenger with the same attuned care. The hum of conversation rose as others noticed the renewed warmth in service. Elodie closed her eyes and imagined the ripple effects. Children on other flights, pushing a button and hearing a gentle assurance instead of being ignored. Parents breathing a sigh of relief. Flight crews who now saw themselves as guardians of dignity, not just deliverers of meals and drinks. Her mind wandered back to a message she'd received just that morning from a mother in rural Scotland. "My daughter Isla has Down syndrome. We haven't flown since she was diagnosed because we feared first-class stigma. Yesterday, we boarded with confidence. The crew greeted her by name. They showed her the override system before takeoff, so she knew what to do if she felt anxious. We landed with smiles instead of tears. You changed our world." Elodie swallowed hard. She lifted her journal, found an empty page, and wrote, "Isla flew without fear today. Now we must ensure none of us do." Tiana, walking past to clear trays, noticed the writing out of the corner of her eye. She paused. "That's beautiful," she whispered, then continued her work. The sun dipped below the clouds as the flight crossed time zones, the cabin's green glow pulsing softly. Elodie looked out the window at the orange-hued sky and thought, this story doesn't end here. For every Isla, for every child whose fear was soothed by policy and empathy, there would be countless more chapters to write. Toward the end of the flight, as descent began, Elodie heard a quiet click. Another override button pressed. She turned to see Tiana, leaning in. "I flagged a protocol review of our boarding etiquette," she said, "for families with special needs. Couldn't let it go unremarked." Elodie's heart warmed. It was one thing to change laws. It was another to see the momentum carry forward in human kindness. The cabin filled with the gentle glow again as the plane descended into San Francisco. Passengers looked out, their windows at the bay sparkling below. Elodie tucked her journal and pen into her bag, smiled at the horizon, and whispered to herself, "This is how we build the world, one respectful flight at a time." The wheels touched down smoothly, and when the seatbelt sign turned off, Elodie gathered her things. As she stepped into the aisle, other passengers waved or mouthed, "Thank you." She nodded back, carried by the weight of shared dignity. At the jet bridge, a small group of travelers waited. A mix of children, parents, elderly couples. They had come to meet her, some holding cards and notes. Instead of stepping into a limousine or press entourage, Elodie knelt to greet them. One woman handed her a tiny paper crane folded from an airline ticket. "For safe journeys," she said, tears in her eyes. Elodie accepted it, slipping it into her pocket. "May your flights always feel like home," she replied. She walked on, head held high, into a terminal forever changed by a girl who refused to be invisible, and by the legacy she carried, one respectful seat, one dignified flight at a time. If Elodie's story inspired you, like this video and subscribe for more real-world justice stories. Don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss an episode. If she can't speak, she can't fly. That sentence, that voice, it echoed through the cabin like someone had pulled the fire alarm on human decency. I turned my head just in time to see Monica, tight bun, sharper tone, grabbing my daughter's arm, trying to yank her from her seat. Liana's speech device nearly slipped from her tray table, still lit up with a message she'd typed moments earlier. "I understand the safety rules. I'm okay." But Monica didn't care. She didn't read the screen. She didn't look at Liana like a person, just a problem. "Let go of my daughter," I said, trying to stay calm, trying not to let my voice tremble. But inside me, something ancient stirred, something I hadn't needed to wake up in a long time. Liana's fingers hovered over the screen. She was trying to type something else. She was crying, silently, the only way she knew how. A passenger 2 rows back stood up. "This is wrong!" Another voice. "She's a child!" And then someone shouted, "Let her go!" People didn't know who I was. Not yet. But in 10 minutes, this entire airline would. 1 hour earlier, the morning had started smooth, as always. Liana was quiet but focused, typing on her screen as we rode to the airport. "Are we really staying near the ocean?" she wrote. "Right on the water," I smiled. "Corner suite, private balcony. I even got your favorite kind of cereal delivered to the room. That got me half a smile. I always over-prepare. Traveling with a child who can't speak isn't about packing bags. It's about anticipating the hundreds of ways the world might misunderstand her. I'd called the airline twice, filled out all the paperwork, emailed access bridge verification forms, confirmed her speech device was cleared for in-flight use. We had early boarding and bulkhead seats, enough space for her chair and her calm. We arrived 3 hours early. Checked in. TSA gave no issue. The gate agent smiled and helped us down the jet bridge before general boarding. That's when the calm broke. The first flight attendant, a young man named Jared, greeted us with warmth, helped lift the aisle arm so Liana could park her chair neatly. But then, Monica entered. She didn't greet us. She didn't look at us. She stood at the end of the row and said sharply, "She can't sit here." I blinked. "I'm sorry?" "This row is designated emergency assist. Passengers must be able to follow verbal instructions. If she can't speak, she can't respond." I stayed calm. These are bulkhead seats, not exit row. Therefore accessibility. Everything was pre-approved. Monica crossed her arms. "Pre-approval doesn't override safety." Liana began typing, slowly, deliberately. Her screen lit up. "I understand emergency procedures. I'm not a danger." Monica didn't even glance at the screen. "You have 2 options," she snapped. "Move to the back, or get off the plane." I turned to Liana. Her eyes were wide, her shoulders had tensed. She was scared. She was trying to be brave. "I'd like to speak to the captain," I said evenly. Monica's voice sharpened. "Captain defers to my decision on passenger compliance." And then, louder, "Security!" The air in the cabin changed. Passengers stopped chatting. Phones came out. Someone started filming. Liana flinched. Her hands shook. She was still trying to type, still trying to explain herself, still trying to prove she was human enough to stay. A man in his 60s stood up, voice calm but firm. "I'm a physician. That girl is nonverbal, not uncompliant. Your behavior is medically and ethically outrageous." Monica ignored him. "Please sit down, sir, or I'll have you removed as well." An officer appeared. "Is there a problem here?" "She's not following protocol," Monica insisted. "She cannot respond vocally. She is a safety risk." I shook my head. "That's not true. Her system is FAA cleared. Her seat is documented. She's flown dozens of times, on this exact airline." The officer looked between us, visibly uncomfortable. "Sir, I think we should step off and talk this through." Liana's eyes met mine, wet, exhausted. I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I knew the second I shouted, they'd win. I helped her into her chair. Jared, the kind attendant, whispered, "I'm sorry." Another passenger muttered, "This is disgusting." A woman said, "I'm not flying if she's not." We rolled off in silence, but the moment wasn't over. It was just waking up. Outside the plane, the terminal buzzed. Some passengers had followed. Some were arguing, others filmed. One woman even hugged Liana. Then, "Ms. Brooks?" I turned. Samuel Diaz, station manager, eyes wide, confused. "I just saw the manifest update. You were removed." I nodded. "Because she can't speak." Monica refused to acknowledge her device, her credentials, anything. She humiliated my daughter. Mr. Diaz's face hardened. "That's illegal and unacceptable." Liana tapped her device. "Why do people hate what they don't understand?" He crouched beside her. "I don't know, sweetie, but you won't be treated like that again." And I, still silent, took out my phone, opened an app, tapped into the FDCI backend. VistaJet Midwest, compliance level, green status, certified. I toggled one switch, downgrade, to non-compliant. Behind me, Diaz's radio crackled. "Sir, FAA alert. VistaJet compliance flag triggered. We've lost approval to board assisted passengers at 63 terminals." His head snapped toward me. "You? he whispered. I nodded. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just made it fair. The first sign that something had shifted came not from the people, but from the screens. Behind the check-in counter, one of the monitors blinked, once, twice, and then flashed red. Access bridge. Priority alert. VJM 482. DEN. TPA FDCI. Compliance. Downgraded. Non-compliant action required. Terminal suspension initiated. The young agent behind the desk froze. She leaned forward, confused. Manager Diaz, she called out. You need to see this. He was already walking back from where he had spoken to Liana and me. I could tell he'd received something on his radio. His eyes weren't just wide now. They were locked in. Tell me that's not what I think it is, he muttered. The agent turned the monitor toward him. He stared. Then his lips tightened. We just lost FDCI access. That means... He didn't finish the sentence, but I did. That means VistaJet can no longer board any assisted passenger at any access bridge terminal until full compliance is re-verified. That was 63 terminals across the country. Jesus, he muttered under his breath. This fast? I gave a quiet nod. When the system works, it works fast. Samuel Diaz turned to me, half shocked, half stunned. You're that Brooks. I didn't say anything. He looked at Liana, who was still watching, quiet but alert. You built the thing that's kicking us out of our own infrastructure. I turned my attention to Liana. No, she built it. I just gave it a name. The ripple effects weren't slow. They were instant. Within minutes, 3 more monitors inside the terminal lit up with compliance warnings. The boarding bridge to Gate 22, where our flight had been, froze mid-sequence. The scanner turned red. The crew inside started radioing furiously. I overheard the codes. VJM 482, halt boarding. Repeat, halt boarding. Compliance risk. And then came the knock-on effects. Flights with pre-approved passengers requiring accessibility were flagged for audit. The VistaJet scheduling system began pulling back boarding passes. Flights to and from Denver, Austin, Charlotte, and Sacramento, all showing pending reauthorization. People started asking questions, and Monica started to panic. She came stomping back into the gate area, her uniform still pressed, but her posture less so. She was scanning the room until her eyes landed on me and Liana. There was something different in her now. Less command, more calculation. She walked straight up to us, ignoring the cluster of crew members now murmuring near the boarding desk. What did you do? She hissed under her breath. I looked at her without blinking. I did what you refused to do. I recognized my daughter as a human being. This isn't over, she snapped. I raised an eyebrow. You're right, it isn't. Because this isn't just about us. It's about every person you've ever treated like they were less because they couldn't speak your language, or speak at all. She stepped closer. You could have just taken the next flight. But no, you had to, what? Make a scene? I didn't flinch. I didn't make a scene. You did. I made a change. Monica looked like she wanted to say more, but then Samuel Diaz's voice cut through the terminal loud and sharp. Monica Raines, step aside, please. She turned. He was already walking toward her, flanked by another uniformed crew manager and a man in a suit, VistaJet's legal representative. The suit had just arrived. You could tell by the briefcase and the silence around him. Ms. Raines, the man said, please follow us to operations now. She hesitated. Why? Diaz replied flatly. There's an open investigation into passenger discrimination, willful violation of FAA protocol, and interference with a registered accessibility system. Your flight status is suspended pending full review. But the legal rep raised a hand. No further discussion. This way. Monica turned and walked, stiff, escorted by the 2 men. Her eyes darted to me once. Just once. But there was no more fire left in her. The room was too quiet for anyone to pretend nothing had happened. 15 minutes later, Samuel Diaz returned. He knelt again beside Liana, who hadn't taken her eyes off him since he'd left. He spoke softly. "Your seats are still yours. We've reassigned a new crew. No Monica. Not ever again." Liana typed quickly. "Thank you. That helps." He looked up at me. "I'm sorry. You shouldn't have had to do what you did, but I'm glad you did it." I nodded, not out of gratitude, just acknowledgement. "There's still more to do." Diaz tilted his head. "What happens next?" I looked toward the monitor, now glowing orange. "Next, VistaJet Midwest either signs the Passenger Communication Equity Charter or they start pulling planes out of the sky." As we waited for reboarding, people slowly began approaching, one by one. A young woman in scrubs. "I work with nonverbal kids. What you did today, your daughter, people needed to see that." An elderly couple. "Our grandson uses a tablet too. They tried something similar to him once. We didn't know you could fight it like that." Even a teen boy, maybe 17, handed Liana a pack of gum and just said, "You're cool." Then walked away like it meant nothing. But her smile said it meant everything. Back at the boarding gate, the reboarding began. Same plane, new crew. The new lead flight attendant, a woman in her 50s with a calm voice and clear eyes, greeted us personally. "Welcome back, Ms. Brooks. Liana, we're honored to have you." Liana typed, "Is this the same seat?" "Yes," the attendant smiled. "But we added a blanket, a snack basket, and your favorite drink. Hope that's okay?" Liana gave a thumbs up. Her fingers started typing again. "This is the first time I felt heard." As I helped her into her seat, I looked down at my daughter, my brave, brilliant, utterly voiceless daughter, and felt something shift inside me. I had spent years building systems for people like her, advocating, designing, negotiating, but I'd forgotten one thing. The system means nothing if the people inside it still choose cruelty. This wasn't about a policy, or a seat, or even a flight. It was about dignity. And now that dignity had a name, a price, and a response measured in airports. Before takeoff, my phone buzzed. An alert from Access Bridge. FDCI. Update. 27 additional reports of non-compliant crew behavior logged. Charter escalation recommended. Do you wish to initiate system-wide audit? I glanced at Liana. She was staring out the window, her fingers resting on her lap. Screen dark for the first time all morning. I smiled. "Yes," I typed. "Initiate." When the plane finally touched down in Tampa, the air felt different. It wasn't just the humidity or the palm trees outside the window. It was the silence. The kind of silence that comes right after a storm. But before the press shows up, Liana leaned her head against the window. She hadn't typed a word in over an hour. I looked down at her hands, resting still on her lap, tablet dark, and I knew. She wasn't scared anymore. She was watching, not the world outside, but the world inside. We exited the plane to polite smiles and a new ground crew that acted like we were royalty. Margaret, the lead flight attendant, walked beside us the whole way, as if daring anyone to interrupt. At the bottom of the jet bridge stood two men in suits. One was from Access Bridge. The other wore a badge from the FAA. Both looked nervous, not because of me, because they'd read the report, because the entire system had. "Ms. Brooks," the FAA rep said, "could we have a moment of your time?" Liana glanced at me. I nodded. Of course. We followed them into a private lounge. Not a fancy VIP suite, just a quiet space away from the noise. And for the first time in hours, I sat down. Liana parked her chair beside me, eyes locked on the FAA badge. The man cleared his throat. "My name's Dennis Hall. I oversee regulatory compliance for federal accessibility enforcement. We received the compliance drop on VistaJet Midwest about 34 minutes ago." He glanced at his tablet. "I'm going to be honest. We've never seen a drop trigger that fast, or that wide." "I built it that way," I replied calmly. "Delay costs lives." The Access Bridge rep, a younger man named Cole, shifted awkwardly. "It's gone viral, Tasha. The incident, the clip, Monica grabbing Liana's arm, the screen showing her message. It's been posted to X, Threads, TikTok, everywhere." He hesitated. "It's past 2.8 million views." Liana turned to me. Her tablet lit up. "Was I wrong to let people see?" I shook my head. "No, they needed to." Dennis continued. "Here's where it gets more serious. This morning, Monica's name triggered 4 additional passenger complaints. From previous flights, non-verbal passengers, elderly passengers, a veteran with a cognitive impairment." I looked him in the eye. "Are they just now being reviewed?" He didn't blink. "No, they were dismissed. By her manager." "Then the system's already failing," I said. He nodded slowly. "Which is why we're not here to apologize. We're here to ask if you're willing to escalate, officially, to Senate Committee oversight." I leaned back in the chair. That was fast, faster than even I expected. Cole from Access Bridge spoke again. "If you authorize full charter activation, we'd move from optional policy to mandated federal standard. That means all airlines, domestic and international operating on U.S. soil, would have to install and train on the cabin nonverbal communication system within 90 days. I looked at Liana. She was listening to every word, not breathing heavy, not panicking, just absorbing. Then she typed, "I think people need to feel what I felt, at least once, so they don't do it again." Dennis exhaled through his nose. "We're ready if you are." I nodded once. "Trigger the charter." It took less than 10 minutes. Access Bridge sent the Tier 1 directive to their entire network. FAA issued a joint statement with the Department of Transportation. ADA, American Disability Association, posted their support minutes later. The official language read, "Effective immediately. Any commercial airline operating within the United States must implement the Passenger Communication Equity Charter and install CNVC, cabin nonverbal communication, protocols across all aircraft. Failure to comply will result in temporary suspension from FDCI authorization and a formal federal inquiry into disability discrimination." Back at the terminal, press had already gathered. Cameras, boom mics, curious stares. I wasn't surprised. What surprised me was who stepped forward first. A woman, early 60s, walking with a cane. Her name tag read, Captain Elena Meyer. "I'm a retired pilot," she said, standing next to me. "And I wanted to tell you something in person." I waited. She looked at Liana. "I had a daughter, born without verbal capacity. She passed when she was 8. Silence. "I watched that clip last night, and I cried, not because it was cruel. I'm used to cruel. I cried because you—" She nodded at Liana. "You never once looked angry, only disappointed, like you expected better." Liana typed slowly. "I always expect better. From adults." Captain Meyer wiped her eye. "Today," she said, "you made the sky safer for kids who've never been heard before. Thank you." And then came the surge. Mothers, teachers, veterans, passengers from that same flight. Even a VistaJet pilot walked over to shake Liana's hand. The media started asking questions, but I didn't answer. Not yet, because in that moment, it wasn't about what I'd say. It was about what they'd feel, and they felt it. The shift. Back at headquarters, VistaJet's board was in chaos. An internal email leaked within an hour. All 63 FDCI access terminals suspended for VistaJet Midwest. $420 million in contract value frozen pending reinstatement. Crew training programs to be audited. Monica Raines, terminated. All past discrimination reports reopened. That's how the system collapses. Not with one big explosion, but with one small girl, typing. We spent the night in Tampa quietly. Liana didn't want to talk, not because she was upset, but because, for the first time in her life, she didn't need to explain herself. She belonged, without proof, without apology. I tucked her in, brushing back her hair like I had since she was a baby. She typed one last thing before turning off her screen. Today made me tired, but not sad. I kissed her forehead. That's good. She smiled, then tapped again. Do you think she'll be better now? I paused. Maybe, maybe not. But now, I added, there's a rule in place for the ones who won't be. 3 days after the incident, the video hit 10 million views. Not reposts, not edits. The original clip, Monica grabbing Liana's arm. The screen flashing, I understand the safety rules. The silent tears, and my stillness, had reached nearly every corner of the internet. And Monica was finally speaking. It started with a blurry Zoom interview on a local morning show. She sat in a plain room, hair down, face bare. The host, too polished to be neutral, led with, Monica, thank you for joining us. Let's talk about the flight that's made national headlines. Monica gave a tight, tired smile. First, I want to say, I never meant to hurt that girl. I was following protocol. That's what we're trained to do. I didn't know who her mother was. There it was. Not, I didn't know she was nonverbal. Not, I didn't know she was pre-approved. Just, I didn't know who her mother was. The host leaned in. But there's now a federal charter carrying her name, and you were terminated. Monica's voice stiffened. I've worked 14 years in this industry. I've served thousands of flights. We're told to prioritize safety. That's what I did. The host nodded slowly. There are also reports that this wasn't your first incident involving passengers with disabilities. Monica blinked. That part wasn't in the question she was promised. I was watching the interview from my kitchen in Alexandria, sipping coffee. Liana quietly next to me at the table, tapping through her schoolwork. She paused when Monica's face appeared. Is that her? She typed. I nodded. That's her. Liana stared at the screen, then slowly turned it off. She didn't want to hear it, didn't need to. She'd lived it. Meanwhile, the real investigation had begun. The FAA, ADA, and Access Bridge had opened a joint review task force, not just into Monica, but into every unresolved complaint against VistaJet's East Coast crew rotation. What they found? A pattern. Dismissed reports. A captain who claimed he'd seen Monica humiliate a deaf passenger 2 months earlier. An elderly woman who had submitted a letter about being talked down to like a child after asking for a wheelchair. Even a former flight attendant who filed an internal memo. Monica is a liability. She's reckless with passengers who need empathy. That one had been buried. Not anymore. Monica's second interview didn't go as planned. This time, the journalist was tougher, no scripted fluff. You've said this was about safety, but 3 separate FAA-certified accessibility reports show the passenger was pre-approved. Her device was registered. The seats were assigned correctly. So, what part of safety were you enforcing? Monica hesitated. I thought she couldn't respond if something happened. So, did you ever try listening to her device? I didn't realize she was using one. It was on her lap, lit up, in clear view, silence. Ms. Rains, do you understand why this has become national? Monica swallowed. Because her mom is powerful. No, the host replied. Because your behavior isn't rare. But her mom finally had the tools to expose it. Back at Access Bridge HQ, our legal team finalized the data dump. Every major airline was sent a compliance map showing where they stood on the FDCI spectrum. Green meant clear. Yellow meant at risk. Red meant frozen. VistaJet Midwest? Red. Fully grounded for disability-related service. The pressure was building. In less than a week, they'd lost $420 million in service contracts, 63 airport boarding rights, 3 federal aviation partnerships, 1 CEO, who quietly resigned for personal reasons. And they hadn't seen the worst yet. Because then came the hearings. The Senate Transportation Committee requested a formal statement from Access Bridge, not just about what happened, but about why it kept happening. They wanted to know why it took a CEO to force the system to respond. Why 27 prior complaints were dismissed. Why disability training remained optional for crew. Why no one thought a child crying silently might still be in distress. They asked if I'd be willing to testify. I said yes, not as Tasha Brooks, CEO, but as Liana's mother. The day of the hearing, Liana came with me. She wore a navy dress, the one with small silver buttons and butterfly pins. I wore black. No logos, no makeup, just intention. We entered the room quietly. No security detail, no PR flack. And when it was my turn, I stood. But I didn't go on and on. I simply said, "My daughter is not a problem. She's not broken. She's not difficult to serve. She's just quiet. And in this country, quiet should never mean invisible." There was silence. And then I added, "I built a system to protect passengers like her. But no system can fix a culture that excuses cruelty. That's why today, I'm not asking for enforcement. I'm demanding transformation." Later that night, Liana and I sat on the hotel balcony overlooking Capitol Hill. She typed something and slid the screen to me. I didn't understand everything, but I think they did. I nodded. They did. "Is it over?" "No," I said, "but now it's no longer hidden." That same night, Monica's final video surfaced. A shaky cell phone clip from 2 years ago. She was in uniform, arguing with a blind passenger, telling him, "Next time, don't expect us to babysit." It had been quietly deleted back then, but nothing really disappears. Everything you bury eventually resurfaces. The next morning, we got a letter from the White House. Liana was invited to speak through her device at a national accessibility conference, but she said no. Instead, she typed, "Let someone else go next. I already had my turn." That's my girl. 5 days after the hearing, the calls started coming in. Not from lawyers, not from news anchors, from airline CEOs. The first was from Robert Lynn, head of Aerovista Airlines, one of VistaJet's biggest rivals. He didn't call me directly. He went through Access Bridge's legal department, but the message was clear. "We want to be the first airline to adopt full integration of the Passenger Communication Equity Charter. No delays, no negotiation. Just tell us what compliance looks like." That surprised me. CEOs don't usually move that fast, especially not when they think they can still outwait the storm. But this wasn't a storm anymore. It was a shift, and nobody wanted to be the next Monica. Within 48 hours, 3 more airlines joined. TransEquator, Falcon Air, Horizon Link. Their reps asked for training modules, tech specs, implementation roadmaps. One of them even said, "Can we put Liana in the video campaign?" I declined, politely. This wasn't about PR. This was about fixing something broken, and you don't patch a leak with a slogan. Meanwhile, the FAA was under pressure. Journalists kept asking the same question. If Access Bridge had the data all along, why didn't the FAA act sooner? The answers got more uncomfortable by the day. An internal email leaked, dated 6 months earlier, showed that a junior analyst had flagged Monica's flight behavior as a potential red-level concern. The response? "Let the airline handle it internally." That phrase became a headline. Let the airline handle it. The loophole that left passengers vulnerable. The story trended for 2 full days. At home, Liana didn't talk about it much, but I could tell she was still tracking it. She'd scroll through the news on her tablet, fingers brushing headlines, eyes flicking toward me whenever something hit close. One night she typed, "Do they really want to change, or just look like they do?" I thought for a moment. "Both," I said. "But even pretending forces them to look at the truth, and sometimes that's how real change starts." She nodded once, then tapped. "So what's next?" Next was data. Access Bridge released a public audit of 10 years' worth of accessibility records across 12 major airlines. How many passengers were denied boarding? How many ADA violations were reported? How many were followed up? How many, quietly, weren't? The numbers were ugly. Between 2012 and 2022, Over 84,000 complaints related to passengers with disabilities had been filed. Less than 12% were escalated beyond a manager. Only 2.1% resulted in any form of disciplinary action. And in nearly 40% of the files, the reason for closing the case was passenger failed to comply verbally. The irony made me sick. But data speaks. And this time, the system listened. The Department of Transportation issued a new directive. All AD-related flight complaints will now trigger independent review. Airlines no longer have sole authority in disability-related disputes. Boom! That one sentence restructured an entire layer of air travel. No more, let the airline handle it. Now it was, let accountability handle it. Meanwhile, VistaJet was still reeling. They tried damage control, quick fixes, interviews, corporate apology tours. Their new CEO, a woman named Elaine Watts, issued a full public apology. She looked directly into the camera and said, "What happened to Liana Brooks is not an isolated incident. It's a reflection of a culture we failed to monitor. That ends now." It was the right thing to say, but it was too late to say it alone. Because the real shift wasn't happening at the top. It was happening in the crew rooms, the terminals, the places where Monica still worked, quietly, confidently, until now. One video surfaced from a training session at Aerovista. A new flight attendant asked, "What happens if a passenger can't speak?" The instructor didn't hesitate. "You listen, just not with your ears." That line went viral again. And for once, it wasn't rage fueling it. It was relief. A week later, Access Bridge hosted a live webinar titled Equity at 30,000 Feet. Over 17,000 airline employees logged in. Liana sat beside me during the intro. I didn't plan on speaking, but halfway through, one of the panelists asked, "What would you say to crew members who still don't think nonverbal passengers can follow safety protocols?" Liana tapped, then tapped again, and turned the screen. "If you don't trust me to understand safety, why do you trust me to survive a crash?" Silence. Then applause. Even on mute, we could feel it through the screen. Later that evening, we received a message from someone unexpected. Not an airline, not a senator, a former passenger. It was just a short voice message. "Hi, my name is Michael. I'm 62. I use a communication board. Never talked to anyone on a plane in 20 years. But after what your daughter did, I told a flight attendant my name for the first time. She called me sir. That's new. Thank you." I played it twice. Liana didn't say anything. She just leaned against my arm. And that was enough. Meanwhile, FAA announced the next step. Not just training. Certification. Flight attendants across the country would now be graded on passenger ethics and communication, including nonverbal response scenarios. It wasn't optional. It wasn't nice to have. It was federal. They called it the FDCI Ethics Index. The same system I'd helped build in theory, now implemented in law. And every crew member would have a score, not to punish them, but to protect the people they serve. By the end of the month, things had changed. Monica's incident was used in 5 training simulations. VistaJet Midwest stock dropped 32%. Liana's story became part of FAA's National Ethics Curriculum, and 12 new airlines reached out to Access Bridge with one question: can we do better? The answer, of course, was yes, but only if they actually meant it. Back home, I found Liana at her desk, watching a live stream of a press conference. A reporter asked the Secretary of Transportation, "What made the tipping point happen?" He paused, then said, "A child with no voice made the system speak." Liana looked at me, beaming. "Accurate," she typed. I laughed. "Yeah, not bad." She tapped again. "Do you think it'll stay this way?" I didn't answer right away, because the truth is, nothing stays. It has to be held, reinforced, refought, relearned. But I looked at her, and I said, "Yes, if we keep showing up." They met in a hotel ballroom in Dallas. No press, no recording, no official minutes. Just 19 executives from the top 12 airlines in North America, sitting in uncomfortable suits, drinking silent coffee. And the one thing on the agenda? What the hell do we do now? The room was tense, not because they didn't see this coming, but because they did. And they still hoped it would blow over. The CEO of Skynova broke the silence first. He cleared his throat and said, "This isn't just about one flight attendant anymore. It's about perception. It's about control. And right now, we have none." Another exec muttered, "We lost $46 in bookings last week alone." Someone else added, "4 of our crew just quit. Said they were scared of getting filmed for doing anything wrong." That's what they were afraid of. Not the injustice, not the passengers, the camera. Meanwhile, somewhere across the ocean, the World Aviation Standards Summit was preparing its biggest panel yet. For the first time, they weren't inviting just policy experts or airline owners. They were inviting passengers, disabled passengers, parents of disabled children, and sitting at the top of that invite list was Liana. Well, officially, it was addressed to Ms. Tasha Brooks, CEO of Access Bridge Holdings. But the letter made it clear, we would be honored to hear a short message, typed or read, by Ms. Liana Brooks. She has reminded the world that ethics begins at eye level. I showed it to Liana while she was brushing her doll's hair. She looked at the invite, then typed, "Is that the one with the flags?" "Yeah," I said. "It's international." She thought for a second, then typed again. "Okay, I'll go, but I'm not dressing boring." Back in Dallas, the airline CEOs continued their closed-door session. Someone finally said it. "Do we sign the charter?" The room went quiet again. The charter they were referring to wasn't a government mandate, yet. It was the Passenger Ethics Accord spearheaded by Access Bridge and the FAA, outlining new standards in crew training, tech integration, and complaint transparency. Signing it would mean opening their training systems to federal inspection, agreeing to publish ethics score data quarterly, accepting third-party passenger advocates on advisory boards. And worst of all, for them, it would mean admitting they'd failed before. The CEO of Falcon Air leaned back and said flatly, "Sign it, or get ready to explain to shareholders why we're the last ones on the wrong side of history." No one argued. By the time Liana and I landed in Switzerland, 9 airlines had signed the accord. Not in private, in press conferences, with microphones, flags, pledges, and one shared message. We are changing not because we have to, but because we finally realize we should have long ago. It sounded good, maybe even honest, but I knew better. Change doesn't start in boardrooms. It starts in fear. And right now, they were scared. Of passengers, of cameras, of being next. The summit was held in a high-rise conference center in Geneva. Liana wore a gold jacket and butterfly hair clips. I wore a black blazer and low heels. No script, no branding. We arrived at the green room, and the coordinator asked gently, would she like to go before or after the delegate from Spain? Liana typed, "Before. I'm not waiting for adults to finish." They laughed. I didn't. She meant it. When her name was called, the crowd hushed. Liana was the smallest figure on the stage. No teleprompter, no standing ovation. Just her and the screen. She tapped a single sentence. It echoed across 700 people in the room and 4 million watching online. "If I'm strong enough to fly, you should be brave enough to change." The room was silent. Then someone clapped. Then more. And then everyone stood. Not because she was powerful, but because she was undeniable. That night something strange happened. A video went viral. But it wasn't Liana. It was a secret recording from the Dallas CEO meeting. Someone in that room, maybe a whistleblower, maybe just tired, had recorded the whole thing. And in it, a voice clearly said, "Let's just sign the charter so we stop bleeding money. We can scale back later once the media cools." The backlash was immediate. The headline on every screen the next morning: "They never meant it. Airlines caught faking reform plan." I expected panic, retractions, PR team scrambling. But something better happened. One by one, junior flight attendants, regional managers, ex-crew, all started posting. "We meant it, even if our bosses didn't." They posted photos in training rooms, holding signs. "Passenger ethics matter. I serve with dignity. Liana changed me." It wasn't a campaign. It was real. The frontline staff, finally, started owning the change the top feared, and the industry began shifting from the bottom up. Liana saw it all on her tablet. She looked up at me that night while brushing her teeth. "Did I do that?" I smiled. "No, you started that. They're the ones choosing to finish it." She paused, then typed, "Good. I have school next week. I'm not fixing airplanes forever." The announcement came on a quiet Tuesday morning. Germany, Japan, Canada, Brazil. 4 countries, 4 governments, 4 languages. One message. Effective January 1st, all domestic and international carriers operating within our airspace must adopt the Brooks Protocol. Non-compliance will result in operational suspension. It was real now. Global. Not just a US story. Not just a one-time scandal. It was law. And the industry didn't take it well. Within 24 hours, 3 major international airlines issued public statements of compliance. But not everyone followed suit. VistaJet Midwest, they went dark. No press release, no update, no tweet. They just went silent. And that's how we knew something was up. 3 days later, an article appeared in a niche aviation policy blog. Small publication, low traffic, but the headline was sharp. "Brooks Protocol will bankrupt regional airlines, experts say. It cited anonymous senior executives, independent cost analysts, and aviation freedom coalitions. It claimed the policy was rushed, biased, and based on anecdotal incidents. Buried halfway through the article was a quote: "The emotional manipulation by certain high-profile families has distorted rational policymaking." I stared at that sentence for 10 minutes, and then I realized they were coming for Liana. The next 48 hours were a blur. Cable pundits started weighing in. Some defended the policy, but others? Should a child's trauma dictate aviation law? When feel-good stories become federal overreach? Is the Brooks Protocol ADA reform? Or woke optics? They never said her name. But they didn't have to. The comments were worse. One thread read, "Pretty sure that CEO mom planned the whole thing to boost her company." Another, "If the kid can't even talk, how do we know what really happened?" It burned. But not in the way I expected. Not as a mother. As a builder. I'd spent my life building systems that made invisible people visible. And now, they wanted to erase my daughter because she made them uncomfortable. Liana saw it. She didn't ask me. She didn't cry. She just walked over, grabbed her iPad, and typed, "Am I a problem now?" I swallowed hard, shook my head. "No, baby, you're the solution they're scared of." She nodded once, then typed, "Then they should be scared louder." That night, someone leaked an internal VistaJet Midwest memo. It had been distributed to all management-level staff under the title, "Strategic Framing in Ethics Reform Era." Translation: a playbook on how to survive reform without actually changing. Some of the bullet points: delay onboarding new compliance tech to Q3 2026. Reclassify complaints to training advisory status to avoid FDCI scoring impact. Public-facing staff must refer to Brooks Protocol as pilot initiative. Avoid referencing Liana Brooks by name in any media inquiry. That last line, that was the one that did it. The backlash reversed. Twitter exploded. This child stood up to the system, and now the system's trying to bury her. I was neutral before, not anymore. #Stand with Liana. VistaJet wants her name off the airwaves? Let's put it on every screen. In 12 hours, The hashtag #Brooks Protocol hit 20 million uses. A TikTok clip of Liana's summit quote, "If I'm strong enough to fly," got reposted with the caption, "She didn't speak to be a hero. She typed to survive." It was no longer about airline reform. It was about who gets to be heard and who gets erased when they finally are. The FAA responded swiftly. They issued a cease and desist letter to VistaJet Midwest's regional division. Any policy designed to obscure or delay compliance with federal accessibility standards will be considered an act of procedural sabotage and treated as a breach of operational ethics. That same day, 4 whistleblowers from VistaJet's HR department came forward, publicly. They provided screenshots of internal chats where regional leaders mocked ADA training modules, and in one case, labeled the incident with Liana as a minor embarrassment blown out of proportion. That line made headlines. But while the internet was busy defending Liana, she retreated. She stopped checking her tablet, stopped going to her physical therapy sessions, stopped eating at the table. I found her curled up in her reading chair one night, blanket around her knees, looking small again. I sat next to her and whispered, "You want me to make it stop?" She didn't type anything, just shook her head, slowly. Then finally tapped, "I want to keep going, but it's too loud right now." The next morning, I turned down 2 interviews. I told the network producers, "No more spotlight. She's not your headline. She's a human." But she surprised me that afternoon. She walked into my home office holding her tablet, typed one word, "Script." I turned. Script for what? A message. My words, not yours. I waited. She typed for 20 minutes, deleted, typed again, then handed it to me. The next day, Access Bridge posted a 57-second video across all platforms. It opened with no music, no logo, just Liana, sitting calmly in her yellow hoodie, the tablet in her lap, and her typed message, spoken by a clear narrator voice. "They say I shouldn't be part of the law, but I was part of the flight. They say I'm too small to change the system, but the system changed when it touched me. You don't have to like me. You just have to stop hurting people like me." Then, fade to black. No hashtags, no CTA, just silence. And the world listened. The letter came in a cream envelope with a red seal. No branding, no subject line, just a return address from The Hague. I opened it cautiously. Inside, a single printed message. "Ms. Tasha Brooks, we respectfully invite your daughter, Ms. Liana Brooks, to deliver a voluntary statement, verbal or written, before the International Coalition on Passenger Rights and Accessibility. This testimony will become part of the Permanent Aviation Ethics Charter submitted to the United Nations." There was no signature, just the seal of the ICPRA and a quiet request. She changed the conversation. Now let her change the law. I sat with the letter for a full hour before saying a word. Part of me was proud. Part of me was terrified. Because this wasn't just news coverage anymore. It wasn't trending hashtags or op-eds. It was history. And they wanted my daughter to speak into it. Liana was folding socks when I told her. She looked up, eyebrows raised, expression blank. Then, slowly, she reached for her iPad. "Will I have to go alone?" "No, I'll be there, every second." "Will they listen to me?" "They're not just listening, they're writing it down in stone." She paused, typed, "Then let's write it well." But halfway across the ocean, VistaJet Midwest was unraveling. The federal investigation was no longer civil. It had gone criminal. A series of leaked documents showed that not only had the airline tried to bypass Brooks' protocol, they'd attempted to sabotage it. They pressured whistleblowers to recant. They paid third-party PR firms to smear the initiative. They even edited internal cabin logs to delete mention of dragging or forcibly removing passengers. Worse still, someone inside had kept the original flight video. And when that surfaced, it was undeniable. Liana, being dragged down the narrow aisle, her tablet falling, her eyes locked on the ceiling in silent panic. There was no noise, no scream, just resistance, and then collapse. The silence made it more powerful. Public rage reignited. The FAA issued a complete operational freeze on VistaJet Midwest. 63 airports suspended landing permissions. $420 million in pending fuel and service contracts were voided overnight. By Friday morning, the CEO had resigned. By Saturday, the DOJ had opened charges of criminal negligence, document tampering, and intentional obstruction of federal reform. And the name on every screen wasn't VistaJet. It was Liana Brooks. Again. We flew to The Hague in silence. No press, no welcome crew, just an escort van, a black car driver, and a woman named Corinne from the ICPRA who handed Liana a folder and whispered, "You don't have to perform, you just have to exist." We stayed in a small suite in a hotel with soft walls and no news channels. Liana read her old journals. I deleted 12 emails from reporters. That night, while brushing her hair, I asked gently, "You sure about this?" She typed, "Yes, but don't say anything for me. This time, it's my voice." I kissed her forehead. The chamber room was a dome of glass and brass. Representatives from 42 countries sat around a U-shaped table. Cameras were limited. No live broadcast, just archivists and note-takers. When Liana entered, the room didn't applaud. They stood. She wheeled to the center podium, placed her tablet on the stand, took a breath, then tapped, word by word. "You've written laws that assume I don't exist. You've trained staff to manage problems, not people. You've spent more on lawsuits than on ramps. I can't talk, but I see everything. I was silent on that flight, but I wasn't invisible, and now you're going to remember me in every policy you ever write again." Silence. Not a cough, not a shuffle. Then one delegate from Norway leaned into his mic. "Thank you, Ms. Brooks. That was the clearest testimony we've heard in years." And just like that, it was done. She turned, wheeled back, and looked relieved, not proud, just lighter. Back home, the clip aired on public broadcast. It wasn't loud, wasn't viral, but it reached the right people. Within a month, the passenger ethics bill was introduced to the U.S. Senate, backed by a bipartisan coalition. Canada adopted the Brooks Clause into its Accessibility Act. South Africa launched a partnership with Access Bridge. And in New York's JFK, one flight crew taped a message over the bulkhead. "If you can't speak, we'll still hear you." The Liana Standard. At night, Liana went back to reading novels. She still used the tablet, still moved slower than most, but people saw her differently now. Not as a victim, not as a symbol, just as someone who stood still while the system bent around her. She wasn't chasing justice. She was the gravity it orbited. And for once, the world admitted it. They had 3 months. 3 months to review, revise, and ratify the Brooks Protocol. And when the deadline came, every G20 nation had signed except one. France. No press statement. No official rejection. Just nothing. They let the deadline pass in silence. Within 48 hours, 6 major airport hubs across Europe, Brussels, Amsterdam, Munich, Dublin, Vienna, and Prague, issued a coordinated alert. Effective immediately, all inbound and outbound flights involving non-compliant jurisdictions will be held pending ethical review. It didn't mention France by name, but everyone knew. Charles de Gaulle Airport ground to a halt. In Paris, the media called it an act of retaliation. Airline execs called it political blackmail. One nationalist newspaper called Liana une fabrication. A 15-year-old puppet of a grieving mother's agenda, they wrote. We didn't respond, because sometimes silence is the loudest answer. But in Brussels, something else was unfolding. A private summit. No cameras, no headlines. The founding board of the International Passenger Ethics Coordination Council, IPEACC, was gathering for the first time. 7 voting members, 1 seat left open. The invitation came via encrypted file. We invite Ms. Liana Brooks to serve as a permanent observer and moral authority advisor, with full access to charter drafts, amendment veto rights, and systemic override privileges where human dignity is at stake. She was 15, and they were offering her a seat at the adult table. Not out of pity, but out of necessity. Tasha hesitated. This wasn't a school speech. This wasn't an advocacy summit. This was global power, and power always comes with shadows. But Liana, she just tapped. Don't block me from the table you fought to build. Their first meeting was intense. The room was glass-walled, ringed with acoustic panels. Delegates from 5 continents, interpreters murmuring, screens full of passenger data. Tasha stayed quiet in the back, a silent silhouette. Liana wheeled to the central seat and opened her tablet. She didn't say much, but when they debated whether airports in lower-income nations should be exempt from ethical compliance due to economic pressure, she typed one line. Dignity isn't expensive, neglect is. That line ended the debate. Unanimous vote, no exemptions. Back home, however, France was spinning chaos. National broadcasters rolled out exposés. Did the Brooks Protocol overreach? Are we surrendering to emotional politics? The tyranny of a teenage icon. And then they crossed the line. An anonymous leak, a photo of Liana, age 9, being carried by airport staff after a minor seizure. Caption, "Is this the face of the next global regulator?" It wasn't journalism, it was humiliation. The backlash came fast. Germany pulled airspace sharing agreements with France. Canada froze bilateral training exercises, and over 300,000 passengers signed a petition to boycott French carriers until the protocol was adopted. But Liana, she didn't ask for revenge. She just tapped one sentence. Systems fail when they're afraid of the faces they hurt. Tasha knew what that meant. This wasn't just about France anymore. This was about setting precedent, that no country, no carrier, no executive was above the human beings they carried. And then came the unexpected. A delegation from French civil aviation reached out, privately. No press, no lawyers, just 2 people. They requested a private walkthrough of an access bridge partner facility, one that had fully implemented the Brooks Protocol. Tasha agreed. On one condition, Liana would lead the tour. The walkthrough lasted 3 hours. Liana didn't speak. She just guided. Showed them the tactile seating path, the non-verbal alert bracelets, the in-cabin silent reporting system, the multi-language ethics interface. She paused at the final station, pointed to a screen that read, "This seat recognizes your existence, even if others don't." And she typed, "It's not tech, it's respect." The French officials nodded, quietly, and left without comment. 5 days later, the French Prime Minister issued a national address. "We acknowledge the need for dignity to guide our transportation future. We will sign the Brooks Protocol, not as submission, but as a statement of who we choose to become." And just like that, the last domino fell. At JFK, a new plaque was unveiled, in honor of the passenger who couldn't speak but changed what air travel means for us all. The Liana Brooks Standard, 2025. Passengers took photos, flight crews wiped their eyes, and across 63 airports, her name became more than a protocol. It became policy. What would you do if your child was dragged off a plane and the world stayed silent? Tell us where you're watching from and what justice looks like to you. Because sometimes, the quietest voices rewrite the loudest systems. The attack didn't come from a press conference. It came in the form of a silent glitch. A single red warning on the Access Bridge Admin Dashboard, FDCI. Integrity compromised. Followed by 19 unexplained violations. Score drop, 34%. Status, non-compliant. Tasha stared at the screen. This wasn't just a system error. It was a coordinated breach. And it was targeting everything they'd built. For the first 10 minutes, the team scrambled. They checked server logs, compared data caches, rebuilt packet trails, and then they found it. A shadow protocol inserted into the compliance AI. It mimicked real flagging behavior, but instead of catching actual violations, it planted fake infractions based on falsified flight footage and tampered audio logs. Someone was trying to make Brooks' protocol look like it couldn't be trusted, and they were doing it from the inside. By noon, the sabotage had spread to 7 partner airlines. 3 airports went on alert. 1 airport in Turkey suspended FDCI use altogether. News outlets started calling it the protocol collapse. Tasha didn't sleep that night. The next morning, a whistleblower from inside Aerolux International came forward. Encrypted email, no name, just a screenshot of an internal Slack message from the chief technology officer. The faster Brooks collapses, the faster we go back to normal. If she can't speak for herself, she shouldn't be writing rules for us. Tasha froze. This wasn't just sabotage. It was personal, and it was cruel. That afternoon, Access Bridge called an emergency meeting with the FAA and IPEC. 26 leaders joined the video call. Screens everywhere, faces tight, voices clipped. And in the center, Liana. She sat silently, didn't type, didn't look upset. Just still. When the third speaker began downplaying the breach, calling it technological turbulence, Liana finally raised her hand. Tasha held her breath. Her daughter typed one line. If turbulence made you cruel, maybe the system was built wrong to begin with. Dead silence, then a ripple of nods. The FAA asked for 72 hours to investigate. Tasha wasn't waiting. She activated a feature they'd kept private, a real-time passenger verification pilot program. Every flagged violation from the past 48 hours was pushed to the actual passengers involved. In under 6 hours, 94% of the so-called incidents were denied by passengers themselves. I was never denied service. No one ignored me. That didn't happen. The credibility of the shadow attack collapsed in real time, but Liana wasn't done. She made one final move. She published an open letter, handwritten, scanned, and sent to every major airline CEO in 12 languages. I don't want to run your systems. I don't want to tell your crews what to say. I want to sit in my seat without being hurt. If that's too much to ask, maybe the problem isn't compliance. Maybe it's you. Liana Brooks. The letter went viral, not in the trending hashtag way, but in the sent silently across boardrooms kind of way. CEOs stopped speaking publicly. Aerolux's CTO was suspended. The breach report was submitted to the DOJ, and the most powerful move came not from Tasha or the FAA, but from Heathrow International, the busiest airport in Europe. They issued a one-line policy update. Any airline that does not meet minimum FDCI revalidation will be denied runway clearance until further notice. 23 airports followed within 48 hours, just like that. Liana didn't smile, but she looked out the window that evening and whispered, "They can take shots at me, but they can't break what I made unless I let them." Tasha stood behind her, quiet, proud, exhausted. "Is this what justice feels like?" she asked softly. Liana didn't respond. She just opened her tablet and typed one last line before going to bed. "No, it feels like accountability, and it's louder than justice." The system hadn't just survived. It had defended itself. Because this time, the voice they tried to erase was the one rewriting their rulebook. 6 months after the day Liana Brooks was dragged off a plane, every flight crew in America had to learn her name. Not because they wanted to, but because the FAA made it mandatory. The final ruling came on a rainy Monday afternoon. Tasha had just finished reviewing her 77th compliance proposal when her phone lit up. A single-line message from the FAA ethics director. Full adoption approved. FDCI now a condition of certification for all domestic and international operators. That meant one thing. Any airline that wanted to land on U.S. soil had 90 days to install, train, and prove live compliance with the Federal Disability Compliance Index, or be stripped of flight authority. And they weren't alone. ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization, issued a near-identical mandate. EASA in Europe followed. SkySure, the global aviation insurance body, announced they would no longer insure airlines that failed to pass FDCI audit. The dominoes weren't just falling, they were enforcing each other. In internal airline briefings, managers groaned. Some claimed it would slow onboarding. Others said it would confuse legacy crews. One executive wrote, "We're being held hostage by the feelings of a mute teenager." That executive was fired the next day, publicly, by the board, in a shareholder live stream. The announcement read, "Vision requires empathy. If your leadership lacks both, you do not belong in aviation." It was the most expensive personnel decision in company history, but it saved them $130 million in compliance delays. While the industry scrambled, Liana and Tasha were quiet. They didn't gloat. They didn't speak to media. Instead, they focused on the next layer of change. Because FDCI handled infrastructure. But the next battle was about behavior. That's when they unveiled it, quietly, and with almost no press. A 9-page PDF sent directly to regulators, airports, and airline boards. No branding, no logos, no signatures. Just a title, the Flight Justice Index, an evaluation of moral behavior in transit environments. Each flight crew and passenger would receive a dynamic rating, not based on stars or satisfaction surveys, but on nonverbal behavior, conflict resolution, and engagement with vulnerable populations. Not to punish, but to reveal. The algorithm wasn't biased. It didn't care about skin color or accent. It tracked patterns, interruptions, tone shifts, microaggressions. It flagged crews who consistently overlooked wheelchairs. It highlighted passengers who showed protective behavior toward others. It didn't judge. It just measured. And over time, it painted a picture of who we really were. 35,000 feet above judgment. Initial pushback was brutal. Flight unions called it invasive. Passenger advocacy groups warned of digital shaming. But then came the twist. Seattle-Tacoma Airport announced that every crew with a Flight Justice Index score above 90 would be fast-tracked for terminal access, premium lounge routing, and top-tier contract reviews. Air Japan offered bonuses for top-rated cabin crew. Delta installed live dashboards in break rooms. Suddenly, airline culture wasn't just about safety. It was about respect. And Liana? She watched it unfold from the sidelines. Her face never appeared in ads. Her voice never echoed in speeches. But her name? Her name became the baseline. This crew scored 87 on the Liana standard. This airline just dropped below the Brooks benchmark. Passenger complaint rate against flight justice rating is inconsistent. Re-audit recommended. It wasn't just protocol anymore. It was identity. The final change came during a panel summit in Geneva. Dozens of CEOs, thousands of attendees, and one surprise agenda item: the future of passenger rights in a post-FDCI world. Tasha wasn't on the panel. Liana wasn't even invited. But as the summit opened, a moderator took the stage and said, "Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the individual whose silent resistance became the loudest reform in aviation history." Then came the slide. Just a black and white image of Liana, facing away, seated in her chair, holding her tablet in her lap. No caption, no quote, just her. And the audience stood up, quietly, together. The seatbelt sign had just turned off when Tasha glanced sideways. Liana was already settled, tablet in hand, stylus resting lightly between her fingers. Flight 713, Newark to San Francisco. right back on Vortex Air, the very airline that had once dragged her daughter from a first-class seat like she didn't matter. 1 year ago, this cabin felt like a battlefield. Today, it felt quiet, like the storm had passed. And in its place, protocols, policies, and people who had learned silently. The flight attendant came by, young, Hispanic, nervous, maybe new. She leaned gently toward Liana with a practiced, respectful smile. "Hi there, my name's Anna. Just wanted to check, would you prefer to communicate through your tablet today, or would you like to show me your preferences manually?" No pity, no tension, just kindness, without the performance. Liana nodded, typed quickly. "Tablet is perfect, thank you." Anna smiled again. "Anytime. You let me know if you need anything else." She walked off, no lingering glances, no awkwardness, just dignity. An hour into the flight, a man across the aisle grew irritated. Middle-aged, loud, restless. He snapped at another flight attendant. "Do you have to keep checking on that girl every 5 minutes? She's not some charity case." The words hit the air like turbulence. A few passengers looked over. Tasha felt her hand curl, but before she could say a word, Anna was there, calm, firm. "Sir, that's a violation of our passenger ethics code. I'm going to need you to lower your tone and refrain from commenting on other guests." "Are you serious right now?" the man scoffed. "Very. We follow the Brooks Protocol. Every passenger deserves peace. If you continue, this may affect your clearance profile with future carriers." He blinked, swallowed, didn't say another word. Liana never even looked up. They landed on time. No drama, no notes, no violations. But something else happened. As they waited to disembark, Anna returned. She kneeled down slightly beside Liana, voice low. "I just wanted to say, I know who you are, and I wanted to thank you. My cousin's in a wheelchair. She flew for the first time last week. Said it was the first time she didn't feel invisible." Liana didn't type anything. She just reached out and touched Anna's wrist. Soft, gentle, grateful. Anna smiled and left. In the terminal, Tasha walked a step behind her daughter. She watched as gate agents nodded politely, as signs read, "FDCI certified," in quiet silver. As a mother with a child on crutches was helped first without having to ask. It didn't scream reform. It whispered it. Later that night, Liana uploaded a journal entry. No hashtags, no public post, just a personal file titled Final Descent. Inside it read, "They no longer ask me if I can speak. They ask if I'd like to be heard. That's all I ever wanted." Then she closed the tablet, rolled toward her window, and watched the stars settle into place. And for the first time in a long time, Tasha didn't feel like she had to protect her daughter, because the world had finally learned how to listen without needing a voice. Would you ride quietly on a plane, knowing your silence helped change how the world treats people like your child? Tell us where you're watching from, and who you're fighting for, even if they never say a word. Sometimes the loudest legacy is quiet.